In a quiet room, an old clock ticked loudly. My husband John was glued to the TV, ignoring me completely. I felt fed up with all the problems we'd had over the years. John broke the silence, sneering at me. I told him firmly, "I'm leaving." He mocked me, saying I couldn't survive without him. But his words only made me more determined. I couldn't take his neglect and his mom's meddling anymore. It was time to leave and take charge of my life. "I can handle it," I said confidently, standing up. Even though I was nervous about what was next, I felt strong. John's mom, who had been living with us for a while, walked in and saw my packed bags. "Leaving already?" she sneered, thinking I couldn't handle their family issues. I ignored her and grabbed my bags, heading for the door. John just sat there, saying, "You'll be back. You can't do this alone." As I stepped out of the house, a feeling of freedom washed over me. The evening air was refreshing, lifting my spirits. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. For 2 decades, I'd been playing the role of John's obedient wife, feeling more like a convenience than a partner. My son, Elias, was the only source of happiness, but even he couldn't fill the void in my heart. John's mom made things worse with her constant criticism and manipulation. Finding a small, peaceful apartment was a relief. It became my safe space where I could think without judgment. I ignored calls and messages from John and his mom, who begged and threatened me. I was determined to stand my ground and move forward. My coworkers at the library, where I'd worked for a long time, supported me. They had seen how I'd been struggling and were happy to see me finding my strength again. Surrounded by books and understanding friends, I started to feel like myself again and began to believe in a brighter future. While I was settling into my new life, Elias called me, sounding worried. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked. I reassured him, feeling calm for the first time in years. "Yes, Elias, I'm doing better than ever." But then he told me about the problems at home. My decision to leave hadn't gone down well. John had turned to drinking, and his mom wouldn't stop blaming me for leaving. I pushed away the guilt, reminding myself that they needed to respect my decisions. Elias hesitated but then expressed his support for me prioritizing my happiness. Ending the call, I realized this was just the beginning of proving myself to John and his mother, who had underestimated me for too long. It was time they saw I wasn't the obedient woman they thought I was. My journey to self-discovery and independence had only just begun. In my quiet new home, I reflected on the 28 years with John. What started as a promising relationship had soured over time. John's charm and our shared dreams once seemed perfect, but he became more focused on himself, neglecting our family. Elias's birth didn't bring us closer, it highlighted our growing distance. John thought providing money was enough, leaving me to handle the emotional support. His mother, Ariana, was always there, criticizing my parenting. She'd say I was spoiling Elias, insisting John never needed that kind of care. Despite her comments, I focused on raising Elias well. He grew into a thoughtful and independent man, a bright spot in our tense home. Things reached a breaking point when Ariana moved in without asking, claiming she was lonely. Her presence was suffocating. She criticized everything from my cooking to my clothes, hinting that John could have chosen a better partner. This new phase of my life was all about breaking free from years of control and finding myself again, a journey I was just beginning. Ariana's constant criticisms were hard to ignore, but what really shook me was discovering John's deception. I stumbled upon bank statements one day that revealed large amounts of money being spent from our joint account. It turned out this money was being wasted on Ariana's gambling addiction and John's secret indulgences. Whenever I tried to confront them about it, it led to heated arguments, with John always taking his mother's side. "She's my mom, Stella. She needs this," he'd insist, dismissing my concerns. The final straw came when I overheard them plotting to take full control of our finances, pushing me aside and leaving me powerless in my own home. That's when I realized I couldn't keep living under their control. The day I decided to leave, I promised myself I'd make them understand the pain they caused. My plan was simple but powerful, to challenge their egos and their control. I started by legally separating our finances, which shocked John. "What are you doing?" he demanded on the phone. "I'm protecting myself, something I should have done a long time ago," I replied calmly but firmly. Ariana's reaction was even more dramatic. "You ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you," she screamed when she found out. But I didn't let it faze me. The time of me being submissive was over. Now I was setting my own rules, beginning their reckoning. After I took control of my finances, things got chaotic. John and Ariana showed their true colors through their anger. Their attempts to intimidate me with angry phone calls didn't work. "You think you're smart, Stella," John sneered over the phone. "You're nothing without me. They'll come crawling back." "Not a chance, John. I won't let you manipulate me anymore," I shot back, standing my ground. Ariana's threats were even harsher. "You'll regret this, Stella. You've ruined our family." "There was no family to ruin, Ariana. It was all fake," I countered. Despite their threats, I felt free. The fear that used to control me was gone, replaced by a determination for justice. It was time for them to face the consequences. I started by reaching out to old friends and telling them about the lies and manipulation John and Ariana had put me through. My honest revelation spread quickly, tarnishing their once spotless reputations. John, who always cared about his social standing, was embarrassed. "How could you do this to me?" he asked me, shocked. "You did it to yourself," I replied calmly. "I'm just telling the truth." Ariana faced the community's disapproval too. "You've made us outcasts," she accused, seeing it as a fight. But I wasn't afraid of her anymore. "No, Ariana, this isn't a fight. It's about being responsible for your actions," I told her. Seeing their social circles fall apart showed how powerful the truth can be. John's supporters distanced themselves, wary of his damaged reputation, while Ariana lost influence as her gambling problem and manipulative tactics were exposed. But I didn't stop at just exposing them socially. I knew their weak spot was their finances. With the help of a good lawyer, I fought for my fair share of our joint assets. Ariana's debts from gambling and John's mishandling of money were brought to light. The legal battles were tough, but I stayed strong. Their lies were no match for the truth, and I won a significant victory in court. When the judge ruled in my favor, I could see the defeat in John and Ariana's faces. This win meant more than just money. It showed that I was morally right. "You've destroyed everything, Stella," John said, sounding defeated. "No, John, you destroyed our family long ago. I'm just picking up the pieces," I replied, leaving the courtroom feeling free for the first time in years. I was filled with hope for a future without the weight of my past. After the court ruling, I started rebuilding my life with the assets that were rightfully mine. Stepping away from John and Ariana's influence, they couldn't believe the extent of their downfall. This was the start of a new chapter for me, one of independence and self-discovery, ready to embrace whatever came my way. The crumbling of John and Ariana's facades was just the beginning of my journey to rediscover myself and pursue real happiness and freedom. One evening, John called in a fit of desperation. "You can't just change our lives like this, Stella," he pleaded over the phone. "I'm just taking back what's rightfully mine," I replied firmly. "Maybe you should have thought about the consequences before betraying my trust." Ariana, however, took a sneakier approach. She tried to turn family members against me, painting herself as the victim. "You're tearing our family apart, Stella," she accused me when we bumped into each other at the grocery store. "This family was broken long before I left," I replied, refusing to show any sign of distress. I embraced my new freedom, enjoying the ability to control my own life. I cut off their access to me by changing my phone number and found comfort in volunteering at a local shelter, helping others who have faced similar struggles. But my fight for justice wasn't over yet. I found out Ariana planned to challenge the court's decision, hoping to get money for her gambling habit. "You won't win, Stella. I'll make sure you pay," she threatened in a message sent through a relative. In defiance, I strengthened my legal defenses, prepared to counter any challenge she brought forward. The person who once avoided conflict had become a determined advocate for her own rights. Meanwhile, John was crumbling under the pressure. His once spotless reputation was now tarnished, affecting his career. "You've destroyed everything, Stella," he admitted during a moment of reflection. "You brought this on yourself, John." "I just exposed the truth," I replied. As time passed, I watched as their seemingly stable lives fell apart. Ariana's attempt to overturn the court's decision failed, leaving her in financial and social ruin. John's professional life continued to decline, his reputation irreparably damaged. However, I didn't feel any joy in watching their downfall. Though it was an important part of reclaiming myself, it didn't bring me satisfaction. My journey was about healing and finding myself, far beyond their punishment. Regaining my independence and self-respect was a big step, but the wounds from neglect and emotional abuse were still healing. As I rebuilt my life, my main goal was to find inner peace and happiness. My journey was transformative, leading me out of the darkness of my past. I became stronger and more resilient. My story wasn't about revenge, but about freedom, a celebration of the human spirit's ability to overcome challenges. Months had gone by since the court ruled in my favor, but the effects lingered. John and Ariana had drifted from their social circles, shadows of their former selves. Then Elias visited unexpectedly with troubling news. Dad lost his job and his drinking has gotten worse. Grandma lost everything to gambling. They're selling the house, he said, the weight of his words palpable. My heart ached for Elias. Despite the distance, family ties tugged at my emotions. Did we do the right thing? Elias wondered quietly. I reassured him, though with a heavy heart, that we stood up for what was right. They made their choices. I didn't find satisfaction in John and Ariana's downfall. Instead, it reminded me of the importance of living with integrity and respecting others. In the following weeks, rumors spread about the sale of their house, signaling the end of their decline. John struggled to find work because of his damaged reputation, and Ariana was isolated as her addiction became known. One evening, I ran into John during a walk. He looked like a different person, defeated. There's nothing to say, he finally said, defeated. This brief encounter was powerful. It showed how much our lives had changed because of the choices we made. It was here that I found true happiness, peace, and a sense of self that couldn't be shaken.
I remember the day clearly. It was a typical Thursday evening, and the aroma of roasted chicken filled our small kitchen. I, Emma, sat at the dining table, watching my two daughters, Lily and Sophie, play with their dolls. The news I held within me bubbled like a secret spring, eager to burst forth. "Richard," I began, my voice trembling slightly with excitement, "I have something to tell you." He looked up from his newspaper, his eyes meeting mine. I took a deep breath. I'm pregnant again. For a moment there was silence. I expected joy, perhaps a smile or a hug, but Richard's reaction was different. His eyes narrowed thoughtfully, and then with a measured tone he said, "I hope it's a boy this time." His words hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. I tried to laugh it off. "As long as it's healthy, right?" Richard didn't return my smile. Instead, he leaned forward, his hand resting on my belly. "We need a son, Emma. Someone to carry on the family name. Make sure it's a boy." His words stung and felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Our daughters, oblivious to the conversation, continued playing, their laughter a stark contrast to the growing tension. In the weeks that followed, Richard's obsession with having a son became increasingly apparent. He would often bring up the topic, his tone laced with a mixture of hope and demand. "We'll find out the gender soon, right? Make sure to check during your next appointment." I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, reassuring myself that his fixation was just a phase. But deep down, a seed of unease had been planted. The joyful anticipation I once felt was now tainted with a gnawing anxiety. What if it wasn't a boy? Would he be disappointed? Angry? The day of the gender reveal appointment arrived. I lay on the examination table, the cold gel spreading across my belly, and watched the ultrasound screen with a mixture of fear and hope. "Congratulations, Emma," the doctor smiled. "It's a girl." A girl. My heart sank not out of disappointment, but out of dread for Richard's reaction. I practiced my smile in the car mirror on the way home, rehearsing a cheerful announcement. But nothing could have prepared me for what was to come. When I told Richard, his face darkened, his hands balling into fists. "What, another girl? Why can't you give me a boy?" His words cut through me like a knife. "I can't control that, Richard. Why does it matter so much?" "You're useless," he spat out. "A boy is essential for our future, for taking care of us in our old age. Girls, they just get married and leave." I stood there stunned. This was not the man I married. This was someone else, someone cruel and unrecognizable. "You think of our children as tools for your old age?" My voice trembled with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Of course," Richard retorted. "That's what they're for, and a girl won't do." The conversation spiraled into a blur of accusations and bitter words. I watched, heartbroken, as the man I loved transformed into a stranger, his words revealing a side of him I never knew existed. That night, as I lay in bed, listening to the soft breathing of Lily and Sophie in the next room, A decision formed in my heart. I couldn't let my daughters grow up in the shadow of their father's resentment. I couldn't bring another child into this toxic environment. I had to protect them, even if it meant standing alone against the man who had once been my partner, my confidant, my love. The next morning, I woke up to a cold and silent house. Richard had left early, without a word. The chasm between us had widened, and I knew, deep down, that our family would never be the same again. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere in our home grew increasingly tense. Richard's disappointment over having another girl seemed to consume him, casting a dark shadow over our once happy family life. His interactions with me became curt and cold, and he began to distance himself from Lily and Sophie, our two little girls who once adored their father. One evening, as I was setting the table for dinner, Richard walked in, his eyes devoid of the warmth I once knew. "When is your next doctor's appointment?" he asked, his voice devoid of interest. "In 2 weeks," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "But Richard, why does the gender matter so much to you?" He scoffed. "You wouldn't understand. It's about our future, our legacy. A son is different." I watched him, feeling a growing sense of alienation. "But our daughters are our future too," I countered, my voice laced with emotion. "They are just as important." Richard didn't even look at me. Daughters are temporary members of a family. A son is permanent. He carries on the name, the lineage. I felt a pang of hurt, not just for myself, but for our daughters who were innocent in all this. "So our daughters mean nothing to you?" He shrugged, a gesture so casual yet so cutting. "They will leave us one day. They are not the same." That night, I lay awake long after Richard's steady breathing signaled his descent into sleep. His words echoed in my mind, a constant, painful reminder of the chasm that had opened up between us. I thought of Lily and Sophie, so full of life and joy, unaware of the disdain their father held for them simply because of their gender. The following day, as I watched Lily help Sophie with her puzzle, their laughter filling the room, a deep sense of protectiveness washed over me. I realized then that, no matter what, I had to shield them from Richard's toxic mindset. They deserved to grow up knowing they were loved and valued, irrespective of their gender. But as the days passed, Richard's behavior worsened. He started coming home late, avoiding spending time with us. When he was home, his interactions with the girls were cold and distant, a stark contrast to the loving father he once was. One evening, as I was putting the girls to bed, Sophie looked up at me with her big, innocent eyes. "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy play with us anymore? Doesn't he love us?" Her words were like a dagger to my heart. I hugged her tightly, fighting back tears. "Of course he loves you, he's just busy with work." But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. Richard's absence wasn't just physical, it was emotional. He had withdrawn into a world where only a son had a place, and in doing so, he had abandoned his daughters. The realization hit me hard. The man I married, the father of my children, was lost to us. And in his place was a stranger, consumed by archaic beliefs and a selfish desire for a male heir. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I knew that the happy family life we once had was irrevocably shattered. The man I loved was gone, replaced by a shadow of bitterness and regret. And as I watched my daughters play, their laughter a balm to my aching heart, I made a silent vow. I would protect them, no matter the cost. I would be the shield against their father's coldness. They would grow up knowing they were loved, valued, and cherished, not for their gender, but for the beautiful individuals they were. The strain in our household grew thicker with each passing day, like a heavy fog that refused to lift. Richard's disdain for our family's situation had turned him into a shadow of the man I once knew and loved. His interactions with me and the girls became increasingly sparse and cold, as if he couldn't bear the sight of us. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, with Lily and Sophie playing quietly in the living room, Richard walked in, his face etched with frustration and bitterness. "I'm feeling suffocated in this house," he blurted out, slamming his briefcase on the table. Startled, I paused, my heart racing. "Richard, what's wrong?" He turned to me, his eyes cold and distant. "It's this life. It's not what I wanted. I wanted a son, Emma, someone to carry on my name. Instead, I'm stuck in this endless cycle of monotony." I felt a surge of anger and hurt, but I tried to keep my voice calm. "Our daughters are a blessing, Richard. How can you be so blind to that?" They're not what I need." His voice rose, filled with a venom that I had never heard before. "I need a son, Emma. I can't be tied down by a house full of women." His words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I struggled to comprehend the depth of his selfishness, the utter disregard for the family we had built together. "So, what are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know. Maybe I need a break from all this. Maybe I need something else." He avoided my gaze, his hands trembling slightly. "Something else? What does that mean, Richard?" I pressed, my heart pounding in my chest. He didn't answer, instead turning away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the innocent laughter of Lily and Sophie in the other room. That night, as I lay in bed, Richard's words replayed in my mind. The man I had married, the father of my children, seemed like a stranger to me now. His obsession with having a son had poisoned everything, leaving behind a trail of bitterness and regret. I realized then that I had to make a decision. For the sake of my daughters, for my own sanity, I couldn't let this continue. I couldn't let Richard's toxic beliefs destroy the little happiness we had left. The next morning, as I made breakfast, my mind was made up. I would confront Richard, demand answers, demand change. But as the hours passed, he didn't return home. His side of the bed remained untouched, his usual morning routine abandoned. Panic set in as the day turned into evening, and there was still no sign of Richard. I called his office, his friends, anyone who might know where he was, but no one had any answers. It wasn't until late that night that he finally returned, his eyes red and his steps unsteady. "Where have you been?" I asked, relief and anger battling within me. "I needed time to think," he slurred, his words tinged with alcohol. "To think, while I was here worried sick?" I couldn't hide my frustration. Richard stumbled past me, ignoring my questions. "I need to sleep," he muttered, heading towards the bedroom. I followed him, my heart racing with a mixture of fear and anger. "Richard, we need to talk. You can't keep doing this to us." He turned to me, his eyes cold and distant. "There's nothing to talk about, Emma. I've made up my mind." His words sent a chill down my spine. "Made up your mind about what?" Richard's next words were like a blow to my chest. "I wanted a divorce." The room spun around me and I struggled to catch my breath. A divorce? But why? What about us? What about our children? He shrugged, a gesture so devoid of emotion it was almost robotic. "I can't live like this anymore. I need a son, Emma, and you can't give me that." I stared at him, disbelief and despair washing over me. This was it. The end of our marriage, the end of the life we had built together. As he walked away, leaving me standing alone in the dark, the reality of our situation hit me. Richard had chosen his obsession over his family, and there was nothing I could do to change that. The days that followed were a blur of tears and heartache. I tried to shield Lily and Sophie from the worst of it, but they could sense the change in the air. The laughter and joy that once filled our home were replaced by a heavy silence, a constant reminder of what we had lost. As I watched my daughters play, their innocent faces a stark contrast to the pain in my heart, I knew that I had to be strong for them. I had to find a way to move forward, to build a new life for us, a life free from Richard's shadow. But deep down, a fire of anger and betrayal burned within me. Richard had abandoned us, discarded us like we meant nothing to him, and for that, he would pay. In the days following Richard's declaration of wanting a divorce, our home became a battleground of silent tension and unspoken regrets. The man who once filled our lives with laughter and love was now a stranger, his presence a constant reminder of the shattered dreams and broken promises. As I tried to come to terms with the looming divorce, Richard's behavior became even more unbearable. He started treating the girls with a cold indifference that was worse than anger. They, too, could sense the change. Lily, the older one, would often ask me in her soft voice, "Mommy, why is Daddy so angry all the time?" One fateful evening, Richard arrived home with an air of finality. He tossed a stack of papers onto the kitchen table, his face set in a grim line. "Here," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I've filed for divorce. Sign these." Stunned, I picked up the papers, my hands trembling. "Divorce papers? Just like that?" Richard leaned against the doorframe, his eyes cold and distant. "Yes, just like that. I can't stay in this marriage any longer. I need a fresh start." A fresh start? I echoed, disbelief lacing my voice. What about us? What about our daughters? He shrugged, a gesture that cut me deeper than any words could. They'll be fine. They have you. I stared at him, trying to comprehend the depth of his selfishness. And what about me? What about the life we built together? Richard's response was callous, his words slicing through the last thread of hope I had clung to. That life ended the moment you failed to give me a son. I've moved on, Emma, and you should too. The pain of his words was like a physical blow, leaving me breathless and reeling. But it was his next revelation that turned my pain into a seething anger. There's something else, he said, his voice steady and unfeeling. I've met someone else. She's pregnant with a boy. I felt the room spin around me, the walls closing in. You have a mistress, and she's pregnant with my son, Richard finished, a hint of triumph in his voice. See, I was right. I just needed a different woman. The implication of his words was a dagger to my heart. So, I'm to blame for not having a son? Richard didn't flinch. It's the truth, Emma. You couldn't give me what I needed, but she can. I looked at the divorce papers, then back at Richard. The man I had once loved was gone, replaced by a heartless stranger. In that moment, something within me snapped. The pain and hurt gave way to a burning anger, a desire for retribution. You want your divorce? Fine, but this isn't the end, Richard. You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it. His eyes narrowed. Is that a threat? No, I said, my voice steady with newfound resolve. It's a promise. Richard left the room without another word, but his departure did nothing to quell the storm raging within me. As I looked at the divorce papers, my mind raced with thoughts of revenge. He had betrayed our family, abandoned his daughters, and for that, he would pay. In the following days, I signed the divorce papers, but with each stroke of the pen, my resolve to make Richard face the consequences of his actions grew stronger. I began to plan, to plot, to envision a future where Richard would come to understand the depth of his folly. But first, I had to secure a stable future for Lily and Sophie. They were my priority, my reason for fighting. I would do whatever it took to ensure they grew up in a loving, supportive environment, free from the shadow of their father's betrayal. And as for Richard, his day of reckoning would come. He had sown the seeds of his own destruction, and I would be there to witness his downfall. The finality of the divorce was a cold, hard fact that settled in the pit of my stomach like a lead weight. Richard had left, taking with him the remnants of the life we once shared. The house, once filled with the warmth of a family, now echoed with the silence of his absence. In the weeks that followed, I found myself grappling with a range of emotions, from searing anger to profound sadness. But above all, there was a fierce determination to protect Lily and Sophie, to ensure that they grew up knowing their worth, unaffected by their father's rejection. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, sorting through bills and legal papers, I heard the girls laughing in the living room. Their innocent joy amidst the chaos of our lives was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. "Mommy, look! We made a castle!" Sophie exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I forced a smile, pushing aside my worries for a moment. "It's beautiful, sweetie, just like you and your sister." But as they played, oblivious to the struggles around them, my mind was consumed with thoughts of Richard and his betrayal. The pain of his departure was still raw, a wound that refused to heal. It was during one of these dark evenings that I received a call that would set the wheels of revenge in motion. The caller was Richard's mother, my former mother-in-law, whom I had always respected and admired. "Emma, dear, I heard about the divorce. I'm so sorry," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "Thank you," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just trying to focus on the girls now." There was a pause, and then she said something that took me by surprise. "Emma, I want you to know that I'm on your side. Richard has lost his way, and what he's done to you and the girls is unforgivable." Her words were a balm to my wounded heart. "Thank you. That means a lot to me." "We must meet," she continued, her tone serious. "There are things we need to discuss, about Richard, about the future of you and the girls, and about justice." Her words piqued my interest, and a flicker of hope ignited within me. "Justice?" "Yes, my dear. Richard mustn't be allowed to get away with this. He needs to learn that his actions have consequences, and I have a plan." A plan. The word resonated with me, stirring a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in weeks. The idea of Richard facing the repercussions of his selfishness was a thought that had crossed my mind more than once. We agreed to meet the following day at her house, a place that held many memories of happier times. As I hung up the phone, a mix of apprehension and determination settled over me. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I wasn't just a victim of Richard's cruelty, but an active participant in his downfall. The next day, as I sat in my former mother-in-law's living room, she laid out her plan. It was meticulous and bold, targeting Richard's finances and his reputation. It was a plan that required patience and precision, but one that promised to deliver the justice we both sought. As I listened, I felt a surge of empowerment. This was more than just revenge. It was a fight for dignity, for recognition of the pain Richard had caused. And with his own mother as my ally, the plan had a weight and legitimacy that I couldn't have achieved alone. "Are you with me, Emma?" she asked, her eyes searching mine for commitment. I nodded, a sense of resolve coursing through me. "Yes, I'm with you. For my girls, for myself, and for all the pain he's caused. Richard will regret the day he decided to abandon his family." And so our plan was set in motion, a plan to make Richard understand the magnitude of his mistakes, to make him feel a fraction of the pain he had inflicted upon us. It was a path fraught with risks, but one I was willing to take for the sake of my daughters and the justice we deserved. Richard, in his arrogance and selfishness, had underestimated the strength of the women he had wronged. But he would soon learn that our resilience and resolve were forces to be reckoned with. The days turned into weeks as our plan slowly took shape. Each step was calculated, each move deliberate. Richard's mother, whom I had come to see as an ally, was a mastermind in her own right. Her plan was not just about financial ruin, but also about exposing Richard's true character to those who still held him in high regard. It was during a routine visit to the pediatrician with Lily and Sophie that fate decided to twist the knife a little deeper. As we sat in the crowded waiting room, my eyes absent-mindedly scanning the faces around us, a familiar figure walked in. It was Richard, and he wasn't alone. Beside him was a young woman, visibly pregnant, her hand resting gently on her belly. There was no mistaking her identity. This was the woman Richard had left us for, the bearer of the son he so desperately wanted. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched them approach the receptionist. Richard's eyes were fixed on the floor, avoiding the glances of those around him. It was clear he hadn't noticed us yet. Lily tugged at my sleeve, her voice a whisper. "Mommy, isn't that Daddy?" Before I could respond, Richard's gaze finally met mine. The recognition in his eyes was immediate, followed by a flash of something akin to panic. "Emma," he stammered, his composure faltering. The woman beside him looked between us, confusion written on her face. "Richard," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "This is a surprise." The pregnant woman, sensing the tension, spoke up. "I'm Mia," she said, extending a hand which I didn't take. "You must be Emma. Richard has told me so much about you." Her words stung, but I refused to let it show. "I'm sure he has." Richard cleared his throat, attempting to regain his usual arrogance. "Emma, let's not make a scene. It's not the place." "Oh, I agree," I replied coolly. "Making scenes is more your forte, isn't it, Richard?" He bristled at the remark, but before he could respond, Mia intervened. "Richard, maybe we should go somewhere else to talk." "No," Richard said, his voice firm. "We have an appointment. We're not going anywhere." The tension was palpable, and I could feel the curious eyes of the other patients on us. In that moment, I realized this encounter was more than just an awkward run-in. It was an opportunity. "Congratulations on the baby," I said, turning to Mia. "How Richard must be thrilled. After all, he always wanted a son." Mia smiled, a touch of pride in her eyes. "Yes, he's very excited." I looked back at Richard, my gaze unwavering. "I'm sure he is, just as he was excited when each of our daughters was born. Right, Richard?" Richard's face flushed, a mix of anger and embarrassment. "That's different," he muttered. "Different how?" I pressed. "Because they're girls? Because they don't carry your precious family name?" Mia's smile faltered, her eyes darting between Richard and me. It was clear she was beginning to understand the situation she had stepped into. "Emma, you're being unreasonable," Richard snapped, his facade of control slipping. "Unreasonable," I echoed. I think I've been more than reasonable, considering you left your pregnant wife and daughters for a fresh start." The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Mia looked at Richard, her expression one of dawning realization and hurt. Richard, realizing the extent of his folly, tried to salvage the situation. "Mia, let's go. We don't need to listen to this." But Mia didn't move. Instead, she turned to me, her voice soft but firm. "Is it true, Richard? Did you leave her and your daughters?" Richard's silence was answer enough. The mask had slipped, and his true character was laid bare for all to see. As they left the waiting room, Richard's defeated posture and Mia's troubled expression spoke volumes. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and Richard's perfect world was beginning to crumble. That day, as I watched my daughters play and laugh, a sense of vindication filled me. Richard's downfall had begun, and I would be there to witness every moment of it, for my girls, for myself, and for the justice we deserved. In the aftermath of the encounter at the pediatrician's office, the ripples of Richard's actions began to spread. His once unblemished reputation started to tarnish as whispers of his misdeeds circulated. Meanwhile, my former mother-in-law and I continued to weave our plan, each step meticulously crafted to bring Richard to his knees. One afternoon, as I sat in my living room surrounded by legal documents and financial statements, a knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Opening it, I found Richard's mother standing there, an envelope in her hand. "Emma, this came for you," she said, handing me the envelope. It was from Richard's lawyer, detailing the final settlement of our divorce. As I skimmed through the document, a sense of injustice burned within me. The settlement was meager, barely enough to support the girls and me. "This is an insult," I said, my voice laced with anger. "Don't worry, dear," she reassured me. "This is just the beginning. Richard will pay in more ways than one." Our plan was already in motion. Richard's mother had used her influence to freeze some of his assets, claiming financial mismanagement. Additionally, we had started leaking information to Richard's business partners and social circle about his infidelity and abandonment of his family. The image he had so carefully built was crumbling, but our masterstroke was yet to come. Richard's mother had discovered that Richard had invested heavily in a risky business venture, one that required constant capital input. With his assets tied up, he would soon be in a financial quagmire. As the weeks passed, the effects of our actions became evident. Richard, once a confident and arrogant man, began to look worn and frazzled. I would hear snippets of his struggles from mutual acquaintances, his business failing, his social standing eroding. Then came the day when Richard stood at my doorstep, a shadow of his former self. His eyes were tired, his suit ill-fitting, a stark contrast to the polished businessman he once was. "Emma, we need to talk," he said, his voice lacking its usual command. I led him into the living room, curiosity and a sense of triumph swirling within me. He looked around the room, his gaze lingering on the pictures of our daughters, before turning back to me. "I've made mistakes," he began, his voice faltering. "I see that now. I was wrong to leave you and the girls. I was wrong about everything." The confession, though satisfying, wasn't enough. "Your realization comes too late, Richard. You've caused too much pain." "I know, and I regret it every day," he continued. "I'm struggling, Emma. Financially, socially, I've lost everything." I looked at him, the man who had once been my world, now reduced to a figure of pity. "You brought this upon yourself, Richard. You chose this path when you decided we weren't enough for you." Richard's eyes filled with desperation. "I need help, Emma. I'm drowning." His plea, though laden with genuine distress, did little to stir my sympathy. He had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. "You need to face the consequences of your actions, Richard, just as we've had to face the consequences of your betrayal." As Richard left my house that day, a sense of closure settled over me. The man who had torn our family apart was now facing his own reckoning. It was a bittersweet victory, one marred by the pain and suffering he had caused, but a victory nonetheless. I turned my attention back to my daughters, the true sources of my strength and joy. They were my priority, my future. And as for Richard, he was now just a chapter in our past, a lesson in the consequences of selfishness and betrayal. The weeks following Richard's visit saw his rapid descent into a world of consequences he had never imagined. News of his business failures, fueled by the leaks we orchestrated, spread like wildfire. His once loyal circle began to distance themselves, leaving him isolated in his self-made turmoil. Meanwhile, Richard's mother and I watched as our plan unfolded with precision. The financial stranglehold tightened around him, each day bringing more bad news. His lavish lifestyle, once a symbol of his success, became unsustainable, a noose around his neck. One rainy afternoon, as I sat with Lily and Sophie, crafting a makeshift castle out of cardboard boxes, a sense of peace filled me. The girls were oblivious to the storm that had engulfed their father's life, their laughter a soothing melody in the chaos. The doorbell rang, slicing through our tranquil afternoon. I opened the door to find a drenched and disheveled Richard standing on the doorstep, his eyes red and swollen. "Emma, I need to talk to you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I hesitated, but eventually let him in, the girls' curious eyes following him as he entered. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where we had shared so many family meals. Now it was just the two of us, surrounded by the remnants of our broken marriage. "Emma, I'm ruined," Richard began, his hands shaking. "The business is gone, my assets are frozen, and my friends have turned their backs on me." His words held a note of desperation, a man clutching at straws. I never thought it would come to this. I thought I could have it all, a son, a new life, but I was wrong. I listened, my emotions a complex web of satisfaction and sadness. "You made your choices, Richard, and every choice has its consequences." He nodded, a tear trailing down his cheek. "I see that now, but it's not just me. Mia, she's left me too. Took the baby and left. She said she couldn't be with a man who had nothing." The irony of his situation wasn't lost on me. The woman he had left us for had abandoned him at his lowest. "I'm sorry, Richard, but I can't help you," I said, my voice firm. "You need to face the consequences of your actions just as we have." Richard looked at me, a mix of regret and realization in his eyes. "I was a fool, Emma. I lost the most important things in my life for a fantasy. I'm sorry. Sorry for all the pain I've caused you and the girls." His apology, though sincere, came too late. The damage was done, the scars too deep to heal. As he left, a broken man, I closed the door behind him, feeling a chapter of my life closing with it. Richard's downfall was a testament to his selfishness and betrayal, a lesson in the price of arrogance. I turned back to my daughters, their smiles bringing warmth to my heart. They were my world, my reason for everything. Together, we would build a new life, one filled with love, laughter, and the strength that comes from overcoming adversity. Richard's downfall was his own doing, a path he had chosen. But for us, it was a new beginning, a chance to rise from the ashes of our past and embrace a future filled with hope. In the wake of Richard's downfall, a sense of calm settled over our home. The storm had passed, leaving in its wake a newfound strength and resilience. Richard, once a towering figure in our lives, had become a distant memory, a shadow of his former self. One afternoon, as I sat in the park watching Lily and Sophie play, my thoughts drifted to the journey we had been on. The pain of betrayal, the struggle for justice, and the sweet taste of retribution. It had been a tumultuous journey, but one that had brought us to a place of peace and understanding. As the girls laughed and chased each other around the playground, a familiar figure approached. It was Richard's mother, her eyes soft with kindness. "Emma, how are you and the girls doing?" she asked, sitting beside me on the bench. "We're doing well," I replied, my gaze following Lily and Sophie. "We've found our peace, thanks to you." She smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I'm glad I could help. What Richard did was unforgivable. He needed to learn the consequences of his actions." I nodded, reflecting on how Richard's mother had stood by us, supporting our cause against her own son. He certainly learned them. I heard he's been trying to rebuild his life, but it's not been easy. "Yes, he has a long road ahead," she said, her voice tinged with regret. "But he chose that path. Hopefully he learns from it." We sat in silence for a moment, watching the children play. The simplicity of their joy was a stark contrast to the complexity of adult lives. "I often wonder about Mia and the baby," I said, breaking the silence. "Last I heard, they were living with her parents. Mia is trying to put her life back together too," she replied. "It's strange how life turns out," I mused. "The choices we make, the paths we take." "Indeed," she agreed. "But you, Emma, you've shown incredible strength. You protected your daughters, stood up for yourself. You should be proud." I looked at her, gratitude filling my heart. I couldn't have done it without your help. As we watched Lily and Sophie play, I realized that this was what truly mattered. The laughter of my children, the love we shared, the future we would build together. We had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. Richard's downfall, while a necessary part of our journey, was now just a chapter in our past. Our focus was on the future, on healing and growing as a family. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. We would face it together, with love, resilience, and the knowledge that we could overcome any obstacle. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the playground, I felt a sense of hope. A hope for new beginnings, for brighter days, and for the endless possibilities that lay ahead. In the end, it wasn't just about revenge or justice. It was about finding our way back to happiness, about writing our own story, one filled with love, strength, and the unbreakable bond of family. You've reached Alara. Please leave a message. Beep. Hey, babe. It's me. Listen, some of the guys from the office are coming over tonight to hang out. I told them they could swing by for some drinks after the game. Donovan's voicemail echoed in my ears as I sank onto the couch. I glanced around at the disaster zone that was our living room. Toys strewn everywhere, piles of laundry covering the furniture, dirty dishes on every flat surface, and I hadn't even started on dinner yet. I'll be home around 8, his voice continued cheerily through the phone. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Love you. The message ended with an upbeat tone as I sat there, one hand resting on my swollen pregnant belly, the other clenched into a fist. The twins chose that moment to start wailing from their bedroom, their cries grating on my last nerve. I hauled myself to my feet with a grunt. I'm coming. I called out as I waddled toward them, my ankles throbbing. My mind raced, anxiety churning in my gut. My due date was 2 weeks away. The doctor had ordered me on bed rest. And now Donovan expected me to play hostess to his work friends? After calming the twins and getting them settled with some toys, I shuffled to the kitchen to assess the damage. Dirty pots and pans towered precariously in the overstuffed sink. I opened the fridge, nearly empty save for some yogurt, a jar of pickles, and a couple of beers. We were out of juice, milk, eggs, butter, everything I would need to actually feed anyone. I glanced at the clock, 5:30 p.m. I had barely 2 hours to clean, shop, cook, and get the kids to bed before Donovan arrived with his entourage. The familiar sensations of panic and resentment swirled within me as I considered my options. I could tell him no, that I physically couldn't handle this right now, but I knew exactly how that conversation would go. Donovan would get that wounded puppy look in his brown eyes and ask me why I had to be so difficult. He'd cajole and beg until I gave in, then act annoyed if I asked for help. It was easier just to suck it up and plow through it as usual. Maybe I could order some pizzas, I mused, picking up toys and clearing counters with grim determination. I could pop by the store for some snacks and beers, straighten up the living room, do a quick vacuum. The guys would be watching the game anyway. Maybe they wouldn't even notice if Mama, Mason shouted as a loud crash came from the living room, followed immediately by screaming. Squeezing my eyes shut and taking a deep breath, I hurried back to deal with whatever new crisis awaited me. This was parenthood in a nutshell. Over the next few hours, I scrambled to pick up the hurricane of toys, soothe tearful toddlers, take out the trash, tidy rooms, lug groceries, arrange snacks, and attempt to make myself look presentable, all while my back and feet ached fiercely. Donovan breezed in right at 8, greeting me with a perfunctory peck on the cheek before handing me his coat. "Got some pizzas and wings on the way, babe," he said, kicking off his shoes and flopping onto the couch with the remote. "Oh, and I told the guys to bring their wives, too, so there will be a few extra." I froze, pizza boxes in hand, staring at Donovan's oblivious face. "Their wives," I repeated. "I thought it was just the guys from work." Donovan didn't even glance up from the TV. "Yeah, but Steve was meeting Kim for date night, and I figured what's a few more people, right? Although, what are we having besides pizza? The wife is, kind of a health nut, I think." The pizza boxes tumbled from my numb fingers as rage sparked deep within me. Donovan finally glanced over, his brow furrowing. "Everything okay, babe?" "You seem stressed." I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could speak, the doorbell rang as his guests arrived. Clenching my fists, I managed a taut smile. "I'm fine, just fine." I plastered a smile on my face as Donovan's guests streamed into our home. As I served drinks and food, I observed the wives out of the corner of my eye. Kim, Steve's date, looked to be in her late 20s, slim and stylishly dressed even in jeans and a nice blouse. The other two women also wore designer clothes and expensive jewelry that caught the light as they laughed and chatted. Meanwhile, I hadn't bothered to change out of my stained yoga pants and baggy t-shirt. My greasy hair was pulled into a messy bun. I hadn't worn makeup in weeks, and my maternity shoes were cropped with holes to accommodate my swollen feet. I felt every inch the stereotypical exhausted, frumpy housewife next to Donovan's glamorous colleagues. As the night wore on, the guests drank freely from my well-stocked liquor cabinet. Their boisterous conversations and raucous laughter drifted down the hall as I rocked cranky toddlers to sleep amid piles of unfolded laundry. After the kids finally drifted off, I shuffled warily to the chaotic scene of our living room. I paused in the doorway, blinking at clutter of empty glasses and crumpled napkins scattered among my once tidy space. My carefully arranged trays of food had been decimated by the ravenous group. Crumbs ground into the carpet and splatters of buffalo sauce stained the upholstery. In the center of it all sprawled Donovan, joking and high-fiving his buddies, a whiskey in one hand and a slice of pizza in the other. He seemed relaxed and happy amidst the social chaos. I sank onto a bar stool watching the boisterous scene, forgotten piles of dirty dishes and empty beer bottles surrounding me. That old familiar feeling of isolation settled around me like a shroud. Just then, Kim wandered into the kitchen, wine glass dangling precariously from her manicured fingers. "Ah, I so needed this girls' night," she proclaimed, topping off her glass with the remnants of a bottle. "Steve has been so stressed and distant lately. I swear all he does is work. I mean, how am I supposed to deal with his moodiness when—" Her voice trailed off as she focused bleary eyes on me. "Oh, hey, Ella, right? Crazy fun party, huh?" She hiccuped delicately. "Is it always like this around here?" I gave a hollow laugh. "Oh no, usually it's ballet lessons and playground dates for me. I live for riveting conversations about potty training and Paw Patrol." Kim waved a dismissive hand. "Ugh, kids. Glad mine are with the sitter tonight so I can actually have fun." She gulped her wine. "Could you imagine being stuck at home with clingy toddlers all day? Nightmare. I salute you, girl." With that, she wandered back to the living room, leaving me sitting there amidst the wreckage of forgotten domestic duties and simmering resentment. Donovan's uproarious laughter echoed down the hall. Hearing his uncomplicated joy, watching him take my cramped home and containment for granted, sparked something dangerous within me. The scene crystallized how little regard Donovan had for my sacrifices as he carelessly flaunted his comfortable lifestyle. In that moment, the truth hit me like a gut punch. The man laughing it up with his polished work friends was not the devoted, loving man I had fallen so desperately in love with 8 years ago. He had taken everything I'd given, my hopes, dreams, and very body, using me as a vehicle to obtain the picture-perfect little life he'd always envisioned. And now that he had it all, I'd been reduced to background noise in his world. An afterthought. A means to an end. The mother of his children and caretaker of his home, but no longer a desired partner. Bile rose in my throat as his uproarious laugh echoed once more. Gripping the countertop with white-knuckled hands, my fury simmered to a rolling boil. I welcomed it. Karma was coming for Donovan, and I would be the one to serve it. The next morning, I awoke to find Donovan already gone for work. The echoes of last night's party still rang in my throbbing head as I shuffled through the disastrous wreckage of our home. I winced at the heavy scent of liquor, stale food, and body odor permeating the space. My living room looked like it had hosted a frat party kegger. As I begrudgingly tackled the monumental cleanup, bitterness stewed within me. Donovan's absence this morning was no surprise, but it stung nonetheless. Once again, I was left alone to deal with the aftermath of his careless selfishness. The shrill cries of the twins broke through my gloomy thoughts. As I nursed them and prepared breakfast, I made a decision. I couldn't do this anymore. Something had to change. Over the next few days, I mulled over my options during rare, quiet moments. Divorce seemed the most obvious choice, but doubt still gnawed at me. Maybe last weekend had just been a breaking point. We were both overstressed and exhausted. Having another baby put strain on things. Maybe I just needed to communicate better. But each voicemail Donovan left only fueled my simmering anger. Hey babe, gonna be late again tonight? Client dinner? Steve got Nick's tickets last minute, so heading out with the guys. Don't wait up. Been crazy busy prepping for this presentation. Probably pull another all-nighter at the office. Can you take care of dinner with the kids? Meanwhile, I was supposed to keep functioning as his perfect homemaker, despite severe late-term pregnancy complications and debilitating sciatica. My doctor said I needed rest, but with Donovan AWOL, I had no choice but to push through the agonizing pain while chasing after rowdy toddlers. Resentment festered with each abandoned responsibility and thoughtless request. I decided to stop covering for Donovan's selfishness. Let him deal with the chaos when he got home from having drinks with his buddies. See how he handled the shrieking twins refusing dinner or bath time, how he liked finding me passed out from exhaustion instead of a hot meal waiting for him. One night, Donovan actually came home early, before the kids' bedtime for once. I expected him to jump in and help. Instead, he flung himself dramatically onto the couch, letting out a weighted sigh. Rough day, babe, he grumbled. Make me a drink? I froze, mid-wrangle with a squirming, shrieking Mason. Harper chomped angrily on the TV remote nearby. Laundry, toys, unwashed dishes, and crumbs surrounded us in every direction. And now Donovan wanted me to stop and mix him a cocktail? Something inside me snapped. I shoved Mason into Donovan's lap, ignoring his yelp of surprise. Stomping to the kitchen, I splashed whiskey, vermouth, and bitters over some ice, then slammed the glass down next to Donovan. Here's your damn drink, I growled through clenched teeth. Now get off your lazy ass and help me handle your own children. I stormed out, leaving Donovan's shocked face in my wake. Let him figure out dinner and bedtime for once. I needed rest, doctor's orders. If he didn't like it, he could leave. I awoke the next morning stiff and bleary-eyed, having passed out fully clothed. The chaotic events from last night filtered back through my exhaustion. Donovan's feeble attempts at wrangling the kids, their escalating tantrums, his pointed remarks about my attitude problem. I dragged myself out of bed, steeling myself for the disaster surely awaiting me. I was surprised to find Mason and Harper dressed and quietly eating breakfast as a freshly showered Donovan scrambled some eggs. Morning, babe, Donovan greeted me cheerily. I handled the morning routine so you could sleep in, even ironed my shirt myself, he added proudly. I eyed him warily as I sank onto a stool, my back throbbing. Donovan placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of me with a flourish and a peck on my cheek. My presentation is this afternoon, so I've got to run soon. But I'll be back to help get the kids to bed. Teamwork, right? He gave me a playful nudge before disappearing to grab his briefcase. I picked at my breakfast, puzzled by Donovan's oddly cheerful attitude after our blow-up last night. I had expected defensive anger or passive-aggressive punishment. Instead, he seemed to be making an effort. It gave me pause about my divorce plans. The twins' high-pitched giggling broke my reverie. My brows shot up in surprise as I took in Donovan crawled on the floor, making silly faces at them. Had I ever seen him play with them like this? "Dot a tickle!" Harper squealed. The kids dissolved into delighted squeals as Donovan blew raspberries on their round bellies and tickled their sides. Witnessing such uncharacteristically devoted daddy behavior, I felt my frostiness thawing despite myself. Later, as I begrudgingly tidied the playroom, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Steve, Kim, and the rest of Donovan's rowdy work crew, bearing cases of beer. "Surprise!" Steve bellowed. "We're kidnapping Donovan for an epic night out." Kim waved at me tipsily as she stumbled past in towering heels. "You don't mind, right, Ella? Thanks, you're the best." I stood there stunned, watching the group laugh and chatter as they made themselves at home like they owned the place. Just like last weekend, I realized. Rage reignited within me, boiling hotter as Donovan came bounding down the stairs, playfully shoving Steve. "Dude, I can't go out tonight," he protested with an exaggerated pout. "I promised Wifey I'd help with the kids." My mouth fell open in shock. He was using the one decent thing he'd done all week to try and manipulate me? Steve threw an arm around Donovan's shoulder, waving me off. "Come on, man, don't let the old ball and chain stop you from living a little. Though I don't know how you gave up bachelorhood for this." He gestured disdainfully around at our modest, toy-strewn home. The group laughed uproariously. Even Donovan cracked an uneasy smile. Fury flooded me as the infants wailed from their cribs. This chaos was the last straw. I stepped forward, jabbing a finger at Donovan's chest. "Get them out!" "Babe," he began cajolingly. A strange pressure gripped my swollen belly. I gasped as water gushed down my legs, puddling on the floor. For a long, terrible moment, we all stared at the spreading pool. Then panic erupted. Donovan shouted orders to his stunned friends to grab towels, call an ambulance. Chaos swirled around me as contractions hit like a sledgehammer. I sank to my knees, engulfed in agony. And suddenly, Donovan crouched beside me, gripping my shoulder, his eyes wide. "I'm here, babe. I got you," he soothed. But all I could see was the terror in his eyes. Terrified of supporting the life he helped create. Terrified of sacrifice. Terrified of missing his big boy's night out. In that moment, I knew this baby and I were utterly alone. But we didn't need Donovan anymore. I shrugged off his hand from my shoulder, bracing myself for the long, difficult road ahead. The hospital room swirled around me, lost in a haze of agony and chaos. Nurses fluttered in and out as I drifted into consciousness between mercifully numb snatches of fitful sleep. The fragments I grasped through the fog were jarring in their injustice. Donovan mixing cocktails for his buddies in the corner, their raucous laughter grating against my anguished cries. Donovan checking sports scores on his phone instead of holding my hand. The doctor admonishing him to pay attention as I weakly pushed our new daughter into the world. Once, I awoke to find Donovan slumped snoring in a chair, reeking of stale booze mixed with antiseptic hospital smells. His friends must have smuggled alcohol in for him, I realized. Bitterness rose in my throat. Even now, during the birth of his own child, his priority was partying with the boys. The heart rate monitor blared a warning as rage spiked my blood pressure. A nurse rushed in, nudging my useless lump of a husband awake. "You need to help soothe her, sir," she urged Donovan. "This much stress could complicate the delivery." "Complicate?" Donovan parroted with a sarcastic huff. "How much more complicated can it get than this chaos?" He strode over and took my clammy hand, his face stoic, but his eyes conveyed chilling disinterest behind the fake facade. Revulsion roiled my gut. How had I not recognized so long what selfishness lurked behind that charming smile? "Just breathe, babe," Donovan urged mechanically until the nurse left satisfied. Then he checked his phone again. "Oh shit, game's on!" He leapt up to rejoin his buddies, now clustered around the small TV. "Yo, Steve, toss me a beer." His jovial tone barely penetrated the hazy din enveloping me. But suddenly everything became crystalline sharp. I saw it all so clearly now, the illusion of marriage and partnership, his disregard for me as anything but a vehicle for his ideal lifestyle and offspring. I had been a naive fool, bedazzled by passionate romance. Donovan gained the doting wife, the perfect children, the picturesque little family to parade before colleagues and clients. As soon as I fulfilled that image, I was expendable. Well, no more. If Donovan wanted his freedom so badly, he could have it, but it would come at a grave price. First I had to take care of our daughter, though, I realized as another contraction ripped through my spent body. I drew from some deep, primal reservoir of strength, pushing through the fiery pain. A short while later, a lusty cry pierced the room. "It's a girl," the doctor proclaimed. I sagged against sweat-soaked sheets, relief crashing over me as the nurses examined her. Healthy baby, no complications, I was told. At least there was that small mercy. Swaddled in soft blankets, tiny scrunched face peeking out, this fragile being was unquestionably worth all the suffering. As they placed her in my weary arms, it felt like coming up for air after nearly drowning. "My sweet perfect Hannah," I whispered, memorizing her delicate features. I would move heaven and earth to protect this tiny innocent creation from harm. Later, as I rested, savoring my daughter's milky scent, resolute awareness solidified within me, hard as diamond and sharp as steel. I would not allow her to grow up chained within a farce of conditional love and performative family values. No matter the cost, Hannah would grow up knowing her own strength, that her worth depended not on someone else's fickle approval. She deserved more. We deserved more. And come hell or high water, we would claim it. 2 days later, I walked through the front door of our house, cradling newborn Hannah in my arms. Donovan shuffled in behind us. laden with balloons and a teddy bear almost bigger than our twins. "Welcome home," shouted Steve, Kim and others from Donovan's office. They crowded the living room alongside family members who had helped watch Mason and Harper. I blinked at the loud cheering squad in confusion, while Donovan soaked up the attention. He raised his hands triumphantly. "Thanks for coming out, everyone. Let's celebrate baby Hannah." He grabbed a bottle of champagne, popping the cork dramatically. My relatives gasped and murmured disapproval at seeing liquor so soon. But Donovan's friends whooped raucously, holding out plastic cups expectantly. I stood there, exhausted and sore, as the parties merged awkwardly around me. Mason wailed from his playpen, begging to be held. My mom appeared, taking the baby from my limp arms wordlessly. Donovan pressed a plastic cup into my hand with a wink. "Here, babe, you've earned it." Then he was off, laughing and mingling with his buddies. I sank onto the couch, blinking back tears of fatigue and frustration. The chaos swirled violently around me, hungry crying infants, tipsy party guests, expecting me play hostess despite just giving birth. An ornery Harper shoved Kim's well-manicured toddler. Cries erupted. Kim snatched up her kid with a dramatic huff. No offense, but I so could not handle 3 babies this young," she proclaimed loudly to the room. Having just one put such a strain on my and Steve's relationship. My grip tightened on the cup of lukewarm champagne as I witnessed Donovan just laugh and slap Steve on the back in agreement. Suddenly the cheerful facade, the arrogant celebration of Hannah's birth when he showed such disregard for my suffering, was too much to bear. Some last fragile thread of hope still binding me to Donovan snapped forever. The truth could no longer be ignored. During the most intense and profound moments of our marriage, bringing new life into this world, all Donovan cared about was liquoring up with buddies and keeping up the charade of involved family man. I had been nothing but a vehicle for him to obtain his ideal lifestyle. The person I fell in love with years ago was gone, if he'd ever truly existed at all outside my naive dreams. Maybe he died the first time Donovan disregarded my feelings to go drink with colleagues, or the first time Steve made a demeaning comment about my motherhood in front of him and Donovan just laughed. It didn't matter anymore. With crystal clarity, I saw now that the love was dead between us. This sham of a marriage only served Donovan's interests, draining away my vitality in the process. In that moment, I swore a promise to myself and my children. I would no longer let this man use me up while giving mere scraps in return. I would no longer make excuses or try to live up to impossible standards. Those days were done. In their place, a cold, ruthless determination emerged. Donovan would pay gravely for what he had done and would face utter ruin. Call it karma, call it vengeance. The right labels didn't matter. Only breaking free from toxic patterns and legacy matters for my children now. I threw back my champagne with purpose. Soon Donovan's reckoning would come. For now, though, it was time to celebrate new beginnings. Over the next few weeks, I discreetly met with divorce lawyers as I recovered from Hannah's birth. I filed motions and drained accounts, rerouting Donovan's beloved bonus money into offshore savings. By the time the paperwork was served, I had already moved with the kids back home to my parents' house. Donovan blew up my phone for days, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. He fluctuated between raging, begging, and cajoling emotional manipulation. I refused his calls with icy calmness. My lawyer relayed steely negotiation terms. I wanted full custody and a significant portion of savings and assets in exchange for a quiet, uncontested split. Donovan reluctantly signed the document, scowling like a petulant child denied candy. With my name solely on the house deed now, I wasted no time gutting his beloved man cave. Out went the garish leather furniture, giant TV, framed jerseys. I converted the space into a cheerful nursery for Hannah. On social media, I made posts showcasing single motherhood. My hair flowed in breezy, carefree curls, and I smiled brightly despite the exhaustion in my eyes. Overflowing my feed with cute baby photos was petty, I knew, but I relished imaging Donovan's indignant rage at the damage to his image. Indeed, colleagues slowly stopped inviting Donovan to happy hours and golf games. He raged to me over texts about how I turned everyone against him unfairly with my lies. I blocked his number as the final divorce papers came through. Soon after, while nursing Hannah late one night, I received a message request on social media from Donovan's friend Gina. We had always been friendly, so I accepted, thinking she likely just wanted to arrange visiting my kids. Instead, an unsolicited onslaught of screenshots flooded in, showing Donovan out at clubs, handsy with strange women, stumbling drunkenly down streets. My eyebrows rose. Apparently, Donovan's downward spiral was worse than I realized if close friends were now selling him out. I messaged my gratitude to Gina while analyzing the screenshots. Donovan clutching stripper breasts, Donovan projectile vomiting tequila outside a bar, Donovan smugly posing with Kim at what resembled a tropical resort. My eyes narrowed at beautiful Kim draped on Donovan's arm. No wonder Steve had stopped talking to Donovan lately. Clearly I wasn't the only one Donovan betrayed. A malicious spark of inspiration took hold as I forwarded the incriminating images to Steve. Then I leaned back, bouncing a cooing Hannah on my lap as scorn blazed from my eyes. Let the hyenas turn on each other. Over the next few days, delight burst in my chest as carefully curated lies on Donovan's shiny social media profiles unraveled. He raged and pleaded, trying to do damage control as career connections dropped him. But it was too late. He lost control of the narrative. The fake perfect life we projected as a couple came crashing down in flames, exposing the ugly truth behind glossy photos. Soon after, Donovan stumbled to my door, begging for money or help winning sympathy with old colleagues. His clothes reeked of body odor and stale cigarettes. Clearly, the boyish charm and last vestiges of cunning manipulation had eroded away, exposing his true mediocre nature unfairly disguised by my efforts for so long. The sight filled me with righteous satisfaction. I had broken the illusion of Donovan's inflated ego and privilege he always took for granted. Reduced now to a sniveling addict rejected by all, he would never woo another woman into submission or needlessly abandon his children again. I smiled serenely, savoring the sinking orange sunset like the closing of a final chapter. Goodbye, Donovan, and good luck rebuilding from scratch. Then I gently shut the door on his sputtering disbelief. Tonight, my dreams would be sweet. I bounce baby Hannah on my hip as we play at the park, golden afternoon light filtering through the trees. My twins race giggling across grass still jewel-bright from last night's rain. Other mothers chat nearby, exchanging bits of gossip and advice. My lips quirk up unconsciously. After years adrift in lonely isolation, I'm still getting used to having a community again. A particularly strong gust of wind escapes my grip on Hannah's hat. We both watch it tumble away, coming to rest near a hunched figure perched on a far bench. As I approach, reluctant slowing my steps, the hat's proximity makes the man's face unavoidably clear. My steps halt altogether. Donovan looks diminished, shoulders slumped, wrinkled clothes hanging off a gaunt frame. His hair lies lank and unwashed. Behind neglected stubble, the confident spark in his eyes seems extinguished. I hover awkwardly, reluctant to move closer but not wanting to abandon Hannah's favorite hat either. Donovan spares me further debate by shuffling over himself. Close up, his decline seems even more dramatic. Here, Donovan mumbles, passing me the hat without meeting my eyes. His bloodshot gaze fixes instead on the kids still playing nearby. Something wistful and sad shifts across his face. I take the hat with murmured thanks, pausing as indecision wars within me. The old anger still simmers below the surface, but outright vengeance has lost some sharpness now with the passage of time. Witnessing the depths of Donovan's downfall firsthand makes me reluctant to twist the knife further. How? I pause, reconsidering the wisdom of opening dialogue. But curiosity gets the better of me. How have you been holding up? Donovan barks out a harsh laugh. How do you think? Jobless, carless. Half my old friends won't talk to me. Lost the house? His shoulders slump further. Been crashing on Steve's couch mostly when he lets me. I wince internally, imagining that tense arrangement. An awkward beat passes before Donovan speaks up again. I'm getting help, though, for the drinking stuff, and trying to be better about budgets and priorities and crap. He kicks at a rock, not meeting my gaze. Not that it matters much now to you, I know, he adds in a bitter mumble. I shift my weight between feet, conflicted emotions swirling. I want to gloat at this proof of karma swinging back at Donovan tenfold. Want to walk away with head held high, confident I alone emerge the victor in this conflict. But resentment brewed long enough turns poisonous for the vessel holding it too. I know harboring old grudges or seeking petty vengeance any further won't add value to my life now. Besides, oblivious toddler giggles serve as a reminder of what truly matters. Breaking dysfunctional patterns so my children have an example of maturely overcoming hardship. What good would wallowing in the past or attacking Donovan now do compared to focusing energy on my baby's future? I heave a weighted sigh, feeling some deep, unnameable tension start to uncoil within me. Perhaps enough wrath has been spent on all sides of this equation. Well, I wish you the best moving forward too, Donovan, I say quietly, and realize I mean it. Truly. Donovan's gaze jerks to mine, eyes wide with surprise that swiftly shifts to dawning, cautious relief. The faintest ghost of his past easy grin teases his mouth. I offer a delicate smile in return. It feels rusty from disuse, but also hints at lightness picking through clouds. A new horizon unfolding gently before me, full of possibility and grace. From across the grass, Harper's delighted shrieks float over as she chases her brother, golden curls and little bowed legs pumping. My heart squeezes, grateful they remain untouched by lingering shadows. Meeting Donovan's gaze again wordlessly, bittersweet sorrow and wonder pass between us over these small beings we brought into existence together. For their sake, most of all, I'm ready to leave residual bitterness buried in the past where it belongs. Life is too short and beautiful. With a nod goodbye, I gather my babbling daughter close and walk into the warm, honey glow of new beginnings. The cold breeze hit my face as I stepped out of the taxi, clutching my baby's diaper bag. My heart raced with a mix of anxiety and determination. Today was the day I'd confront Noah, my husband, after a month of eerie silence. As I approached our shared home, the familiar scent of autumn leaves brought back a flood of memories. Memories of a happier time that now seemed like a distant dream. I reached for the doorknob, my hands trembling slightly. The house was quiet, too quiet. Something felt off. I tiptoed to our bedroom, the one place I dreaded to go. The door creaked open, and there it was, the scene that shattered my world. Noah, entangled with a young woman, their laughter echoing in the room. My heart sank. "Noah, what are you doing?" My voice was a mere whisper, but it cut through the room like a knife. He looked up, his eyes void of any remorse. "It's obvious, isn't it, Claire? I'm moving on." The woman beside him, barely older than a college student, giggled. "Yeah, we're living together now. You should take the baby and leave." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I fought them back. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. "Noah, after everything, this is how it ends?" I tried to keep my voice steady. He shrugged, a cold, distant look in his eyes. "It's not cheating, Claire. It's just life. Meet Lily, my new beginning." Lily smirked, a triumphant glint in her eyes. "Noah's a high earner, unlike you. We're going to live the life you could never give him." The irony stung. Noah barely made enough to cover his own expenses, let alone support a lavish lifestyle. But I wasn't going to waste my breath explaining that to her. I took a deep breath, channeling my anger and hurt into resolve. "Fine, Noah, you've made your choice. But remember, karma has a way of coming back around." I turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. "And Noah, I may not have been the perfect wife, but I was the one who stood by you when no one else did. You'll realize that one day." As I walked out of that room, the sound of their laughter followed me. But it didn't matter anymore. I had a child to think about, a life to rebuild. Noah and his delusions were no longer my concern. I sat in my old bedroom at my parents' house, cradling my sleeping baby. The walls, adorned with remnants of my past, felt both comforting and suffocating. As my baby breathed softly in my arms, my mind wandered back to the days before my life turned upside down. Noah and I met when I was a thriving graphic designer, and he was a charming barista with a love for life. His carefree spirit was a refreshing contrast to my structured world. Despite the 5-year age gap, his pursuit was relentless, and I found myself falling for his charm. Our whirlwind romance was filled with laughter, parties, and promises of a future together. I cherished those moments, feeling a sense of belonging I hadn't known before. But there were signs I chose to ignore. Signs that Noah's love for fun masked a deeper immaturity. When he proposed, I was ecstatic but also hesitant. My sister Laura, ever the pragmatist, encouraged me to take the leap. "You're not getting any younger, Claire. Noah's a good guy. Just go for it," she had said. So I did. I married Noah, envisioning a life filled with love and shared dreams. but the reality was far different. Shortly after our wedding, Noah quit his job. "I want to be my own boss. I need your support," he had said with a sparkle in his eye that I mistook for ambition. I agreed, believing in his potential. But as months turned into a year, Noah's business plans amounted to nothing more than fantasies. He lingered in the shadows of unemployment, his part-time bar job barely contributing to our finances. Then came the pregnancy. I thought it would be a turning point, a reason for Noah to step up, but his reaction to my news was anything but joyful. The glass shattering against the wall, his refusal to acknowledge our reality, it was the beginning of the end. I was alone, navigating through pregnancy while Noah drowned himself in nightlife and excuses. The scent of another woman's perfume on his clothes was a cruel confirmation of my fears. Confronting him only led to denials and aggression. I was alone, even when he was right beside me. As I rocked my baby, a sense of clarity washed over me. Noah had chosen his path, a path that didn't include us. I couldn't change him, but I could change my response to the chaos he brought into our lives. I looked down at my baby, a symbol of my new beginning. "We'll be okay," I whispered. "We have each other." The days following my encounter with Noah were a blur of sleepless nights and endless questions. As I sat in the living room of my parents' house, the reality of my situation sank in. Noah's betrayal wasn't just a fleeting mistake. It was a deliberate choice that shattered our family. My parents tried to comfort me, but their words felt like empty echoes in the vast emptiness of my heart. I appreciated their support, but inside I was a storm of anger and disappointment. One evening, as I was putting my baby to sleep, my phone buzzed. It was Laura. Her voice was laced with concern. "Claire, how are you holding up?" "I'm surviving, Laura. That's about it," I replied, trying to sound stronger than I felt. Laura sighed. "You know, I never liked Noah. He always seemed off. I should have said something sooner." "It's not your fault, Laura. I was the one who fell for his lies," I said, my voice tinged with bitterness. There was a pause before Laura spoke again. "You know, Claire, maybe it's time for a little payback. Noah needs to learn he can't just walk over people without consequences." Her words ignited something in me, a sense of purpose, perhaps, or the first spark of a plan. "What do you have in mind?" I asked, my interest piqued. Laura's voice was now firm. "First, let's secure child support and alimony. Noah may not have much, but he owes you and your baby. And then, let's expose him for the liar he is. His little bubble with Lily won't last if she sees him for who he truly is." A smile crept onto my face, the first in what felt like ages. Laura was right. Noah had to learn that actions have consequences. And I was going to make sure he understood that lesson. Over the next few days, Laura and I put together a plan. We gathered evidence of Noah's infidelity, his empty promises, and his financial instability. It was time for Noah to face the music. The day of the confrontation arrived. I felt a mix of nerves and determination as I walked into the coffee shop where we agreed to meet. Noah was already there, looking uncomfortable. "Claire, I'm sorry," he started, but I cut him off. "Save it, Noah. I'm here for one thing only. You need to start taking responsibility, financial responsibility for your child," I said, my voice unwavering. Noah shifted in his seat. "I don't have much money, Claire. You know that." "That's not my problem. You made your bed. Now lie in it. You will pay child support, and we're going through the legal channels to ensure that," I said, handing him the papers Laura had prepared. He looked at them, his face a mix of shock and anger. "You can't do this to me, Claire. I don't deserve this." "Deserve? You lost the right to talk about what you deserve when you betrayed me and our child," I replied, my voice steady but filled with emotion. Noah tried to argue, but I was done listening. I stood up, ready to leave. "This is just the beginning, Noah. You're going to learn what it means to face consequences." As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt a sense of empowerment. The road ahead would be tough, but I was ready to fight. For my child, and for the justice we deserved. In the weeks following my confrontation with Noah, I poured all my energy into the legal proceedings for child support and alimony. Each document I signed felt like a step away from the life I once knew, and a step towards something new, something mine. One evening, as I sat at my parents' dining table going over the paperwork, Laura called. Her voice was urgent. "Claire, I've got news. You're not going to like it." I braced myself. "What is it?" It's about Noah and Lily. They're planning to leave town. Seems like they want to start over somewhere new, she said, a hint of anger in her voice. I felt a rush of emotions, anger, relief, frustration. He's running away from his responsibilities, again. We can't let him get away with this, Claire. Not after everything he's put you through, Laura replied, her tone resolute. A plan began to form in my mind. I have an idea, but it's risky. We need to expose him, not just legally, but publicly. Let everyone see him for the coward he is. Laura was silent for a moment, then said, Tell me what you need. I'm with you all the way. Over the next few days, Laura and I gathered evidence of Noah's infidelity, his financial irresponsibility, and his plans to flee. We compiled everything into a dossier, a damning portrait of a man who had fallen far from grace. Then I made a call that I never thought I would. I contacted a friend who worked in local media. I have a story for you. It's about a man who betrayed his family and is trying to escape his past. The story went live 2 days later. It detailed Noah's actions, his lack of support for his child, and his plans to leave town with Lily. The response was immediate. Friends, acquaintances, and even strangers expressed their outrage and support for me. Noah called me the day the story broke, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. Claire, how could you do this? You've ruined everything. You did that all by yourself, Noah. I just shed light on it, I replied, my voice calm but firm. He was silent for a moment, then said, I'll never forgive you for this. You don't have to. I'm not doing this for your forgiveness. I'm doing it for justice, for me and our child, I said, and hung up. As I ended the call, I felt a sense of liberation. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my destiny. In the aftermath of the exposé, my life became a whirlwind of legal battles and public scrutiny. Noah's attempts to flee with Lily were thwarted, but the fight for child support and alimony was far from over. During this tumultuous period, I found solace in the small moments with my child. Each giggle and coo was a reminder of what truly mattered. Amid the chaos, my baby was my anchor, my reason to keep fighting. One day, as I was going through another stack of legal papers, my phone rang. It was Laura. Claire, you won't believe what I just found out. What is it? I asked, weary yet curious. Lily left Noah. She's moved out of his place. Seems she couldn't handle the pressure and the backlash from the story. Laura said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated, yet another part felt a pang of sympathy. Lily, just like me, had been swept up in Noah's lies. That's not all, Laura continued. I've heard that Noah's struggling financially. Without Lily's income, he can barely make ends meet. The news didn't bring me joy. Instead, it was a sobering reminder of the mess Noah had created for himself, for me, and for our child. As the days passed, Noah became increasingly desperate. He tried to appeal to my sympathies, calling and messaging me, pleading for a reduction in the child support demands. But I was resolute. Noah, you have a responsibility to your child. I won't let you shirk that, I told him during one of his calls. He lashed out, his voice bitter. You're heartless, Claire. You've ruined my life. I haven't ruined your life, Noah. I've simply held you accountable for your actions. It's time you face the consequences, I replied before ending the call. The legal proceedings dragged on, but eventually the court ruled in my favor. Noah was ordered to pay child support and a modest sum for alimony. It wasn't about the money. It was about accountability. The day I received the first child support payment marked a turning point. It was a small victory in a long and exhausting battle. As I sat in my parents' garden, watching my child play, I realized how much I had grown. The naive woman who once loved Noah unconditionally was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I had survived the storm Noah brought into my life, and in its wake, I found a newfound strength. I was ready to rebuild my life, not just for my sake, but for my child's future. The months following the court's decision were a time of rebuilding for me. With the child support and alimony, I managed to secure a small apartment for my child and me. It was modest, but ours, a sanctuary from the chaos of the past. But peace was elusive. Noah, now burdened with financial obligations, started to show his true colors more than ever. His calls became more frequent and more aggressive. One evening, as I was putting my baby to bed, my phone rang. It was Noah, his voice laced with frustration and anger. Claire, this isn't fair. I can't afford to live with these payments. Fair? Noah, you seem to have a twisted sense of fairness. This is about providing for your child, I responded, trying to keep my voice calm. You've turned everyone against me. I've lost my friends, my reputation. How am I supposed to find a decent job now? He retorted. That was your doing, Noah. You chose your actions. Now you're facing the consequences, I said firmly. There was a pause on the line, and when he spoke again, his voice was colder, more calculating. You know, Claire, I've been thinking. Maybe we can come to an arrangement. Reduce the payments and I'll stay out of your life for good. I felt a chill run down my spine. His words were a thinly veiled threat, a bargaining chip he had no right to use. You don't get to bargain with your responsibilities, Noah. You will make the payments as ordered by the court or face the legal consequences. His response was a venomous sneer. You think you've won, Claire, but this isn't over. I'll find a way out of this. The call ended, but his words lingered in the air, a dark cloud over my newfound stability. The next few weeks were tense. Noah's attempts to negotiate were relentless, but I refused to budge. The welfare of my child was non-negotiable. Then one day, I received a call from a mutual acquaintance. Claire, have you heard about Noah? No. What about him? I asked, a sense of foreboding settling over me. He's leaving town, says he's found a job somewhere else, far away. He's desperate to start over, the acquaintance said. A part of me felt relief at the prospect of Noah's departure, but another part was wary. His departure could mean more complications in receiving the child support. I called Laura, needing to share my concerns. Laura, if Noah leaves town, it could make things difficult for us. Don't worry, Claire. We'll make sure the legal system holds him accountable. He can't just run away from his obligations, Laura assured me. In the weeks that followed, Laura and I worked tirelessly to ensure that Noah's responsibilities were enforced, regardless of his whereabouts. It was a battle, one that tested my patience and resolve, but I was determined to see it through. As I watched my child play one afternoon, a sense of determination filled me. Noah's actions would not define our future. I was going to fight for what was rightfully ours, for the stability and security of my child. As the weeks turned into months, the strain of the ongoing legal battles with Noah began to take a toll on me. Yet, amid the exhaustion, a relentless fire of determination kept me going. My child was growing, oblivious to the turmoil, and that innocence was what I fought for every day. The day I received a call from my lawyer, I braced myself for another round of exhausting news. However, what he said took me by surprise. Claire, you might want to sit down for this. What is it? I asked, a sense of apprehension washing over me. Noah's been let go from his new job, apparently due to performance issues and a negative attitude. He's also struggling to find another position, the lawyer explained. A part of me felt a twinge of satisfaction, knowing that Noah's own actions were leading to his downfall. But the more significant concern was the child support. What does this mean for the payments? He's petitioning to reduce the child support, claiming financial hardship. We need to prepare for a hearing, my lawyer said. I hung up the phone, feeling a mix of anger and resolution. Noah's irresponsibility was once again trying to upend the fragile stability I had built for my child and me. Determined to not let Noah wriggle out of his obligations, I reached out to Laura. Noah's trying to reduce the child support. We can't let him get away with it. Laura's voice was firm. We won't. Let's gather evidence of his spending habits, his lifestyle. If he's claiming financial hardship, he needs to prove it. The following weeks were a frenzy of collecting evidence and preparing for the hearing. I delved into Noah's social media and bank statements, uncovering a trail of irresponsible spending that belied his claims of hardship. The day of the hearing arrived, and I faced Noah across the courtroom. He looked disheveled, a shadow of the confident man he once was. As the evidence of his financial recklessness was laid bare for the court to see, I saw a flicker of realization in his eyes. He understood that his charade was over. The judge was unsympathetic to Noah's plea. Mr. Noah, your financial difficulties appear to be largely due to your own choices. The court sees no reason to reduce the child support. You are obligated to provide for your child. Noah's face turned red with frustration, but there was nothing he could do. The court's decision was final. As I left the courtroom, a weight lifted off my shoulders. It wasn't a victory in the traditional sense, but it was justice, a declaration that Noah couldn't evade his responsibilities. Back at home, as I watched my child play, a sense of peace enveloped me. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but I had persevered. I had stood up to Noah and protected my child's future. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what lay ahead, I would always find the strength to face it head on. The months following the court's decision were a mix of relief and vigilance. Noah's erratic behavior and financial instability continued, but now, with the legal backing, I had a semblance of control over the situation. One day, as I was organizing my child's playroom, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered hesitantly. "Hello, Claire, it's me, Noah," came the voice, tinged with a tone I couldn't quite place. "What do you want, Noah?" I asked, bracing myself for another round of excuses or pleas. "I'm calling to apologize. I know it doesn't change anything, but I wanted you to know that I regret how things turned out," he said, his voice almost a whisper. His apology took me by surprise. "Regret doesn't change the past, Noah. Actions do." "I understand. I've been trying to turn things around, get my life in order. I just wanted you to know that," he replied. I paused, considering his words. "I hope, for your sake, that's true. But it doesn't change anything between us. You have responsibilities, and you need to uphold them." "I know. I'll keep up with the payments. I owe that much to our child," he said, a note of sincerity in his voice that I hadn't heard in a long time. "Make sure you do. That's all I ask," I replied before ending the call. In the following weeks, to my surprise, Noah did keep up with his payments. There were no more calls, no more pleas for leniency. It seemed he was finally starting to take responsibility, albeit in his limited capacity. One afternoon, as I watched my child play in the park, Laura joined me on the bench. "How are you feeling about everything? With Noah, I mean." I looked at her, a small smile forming on my lips. "I feel like I can finally breathe, Laura, like I'm not constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop." She squeezed my hand. "You've come a long way, Claire. You should be proud of yourself." As we sat there, watching my child laugh and run, I realized how much I had changed. The ordeal with Noah had been a crucible, one that tested and tempered me. I had learned to stand up for myself and my child, to fight for what was right. The path ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but I felt ready to face them. I had found my strength, and with it, a sense of peace and hope for the future. Months had passed since Noah began making regular child support payments. It was a change I had never expected, yet it brought a sense of stability to my life. But even with this newfound stability, the scars of the past lingered. One crisp autumn morning, as I sipped my coffee and watched my child play, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Noah's number. A sense of apprehension washed over me as I answered. "Claire, I need to talk to you. It's important," Noah's voice came through, sounding serious. "What is it, Noah?" I asked, my guard up. "I'm moving away, Claire. Far away. I've got a job offer and it's a chance to start anew. I wanted you to know," he said. I processed his words, feeling a complex mix of emotions: relief, skepticism, and a faint trace of sadness. "And the child support?" "I'll continue to pay. I've set up automatic transfers. I owe that much to our child," Noah replied. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Good. That's all I ask." There was a brief silence before he spoke again. "Claire, I'm sorry for everything. I hope one day you can forgive me." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "I've moved past forgiveness, Noah. I just want a peaceful life for me and our child. I hope you find what you're looking for." We said our goodbyes, and as I hung up the phone, a sense of closure enveloped me. Noah's departure was the end of a painful chapter and the beginning of something new. In the following weeks, life settled into a comfortable routine. My work, my child, and the quiet moments of joy we shared became my world. The turmoil of the past seemed like a distant storm that had passed, leaving behind clear skies. One evening, as I tucked my child into bed, I reflected on the journey we had been on. The pain, the battles, and the triumphs. I had emerged stronger, more resilient, and with a deeper understanding of myself. I realized then that my story wasn't just about revenge or retribution. It was about growth, about finding my voice and standing up for what was right. It was about building a life on my terms, filled with love and purpose. As I turned off the lights and left the room, I knew that the future was bright. a future I had fought for, a future full of possibilities. Noah's chapter in my life was closed, but my story was just beginning. And with my child by my side, I was ready to write the next chapters, filled with hope, strength, and endless love. I stood frozen, the phone clutched in my trembling hand. My heart pounded against my chest as the voice on the other end repeated the words that shattered my world. "Mrs. Thompson, your daughter Sophie has been in an accident." Rushing into action, I dialed Alan's number. He needed to be there for Sophie. For us, the call connected, and I heard the distant sound of laughter and casual chatter. "Alan, you need to come to the hospital right now. It's Sophie. I began, my voice choked with panic. "What now, Laura?" Alan's voice was edged with annoyance, a stark contrast to my distress. "I told you I had an important outing with my boss today. Can't this wait?" "No, it can't wait," I cried out, feeling a surge of frustration. "Sophie's been in a car accident. She's in the hospital." There was a brief pause. Then, in a tone devoid of warmth, Alan said, "So, what do you want me to do about it?" His words hit me like a physical blow. "What do I want? She's your daughter too, Alan. How can you even say that?" "I don't care, Laura. Golfing with my boss is more important. You handle it." His voice was cold, unyielding. Tears streamed down my face, my body shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. "How can you be so heartless? She could be." The line went dead. He had hung up. I stood there alone, feeling a profound sense of betrayal. Alan, the man I had loved, the father of my child, had turned his back on us. I rushed to the hospital, my mind a whirlwind of fear and anger. The drive was a blur. Every red light a torturous delay, each passing second an eternity. Arriving at the hospital, I ran through the corridors, guided by a mixture of maternal instinct and adrenaline. Sophie was lying in a hospital bed, her face pale and her eyes closed. The sight of her, so fragile and vulnerable, reignited a fierce protectiveness within me. I took her hand, whispering words of love and encouragement, even though she couldn't hear me. Hours passed, a torturous wait for news. Finally, a doctor approached. "Mrs. Thompson, your daughter is stable. She's lucky. The injuries aren't life-threatening. She needs rest and should make a full recovery." Relief washed over me, followed by a renewed sense of anger towards Alan. How could he not be here at a time like this? His absence was a silent testament to his indifference, a stark contrast to the fear and concern that had consumed me. Returning home that night, the house felt emptier, colder. Alan's indifference had carved a chasm in our family that seemed impossible to bridge. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I knew something had irrevocably changed. The man I had married, the father of my child, was a stranger to me now. I made a decision that night. I couldn't continue living in the shadow of a man who valued his career over his own daughter's life. Our family, once filled with love and laughter, had become a facade, and I was determined to break free from it. I drifted into a restless sleep, my mind made up. Tomorrow, I would start the process of reclaiming our lives. But for tonight, my heart ached for the family we once were, now lost to Alan's unfathomable indifference. The days following Sophie's accident were a blur of hospital visits and silent dinners. Alan's absence was a constant, gnawing presence in our home. He neither visited Sophie nor inquired about her condition. It was as if we had ceased to exist in his world. One evening, as Sophie and I sat at the dinner table, the weight of his absence hung heavily between us. "Mom, why hasn't Dad come to see me? Did I do something wrong?" Sophie's voice was small, tinged with confusion and hurt. I reached across the table, taking her hand. "No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. Your dad, he's just caught up with work." "But he didn't even call," she whispered, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. I struggled to find words that could shield her from the painful truth. "Sometimes people show their love in different ways, Sophie. Maybe he just doesn't know how to express his worry." Sophie didn't seem convinced. Her eyes, once filled with admiration for her father, now mirrored the disillusionment I felt. In the weeks that followed, Alan's indifference grew more pronounced. He would leave early in the morning and return late at night, avoiding any interaction with us. Sophie's attempts to talk to him were met with cold dismissiveness, leaving her increasingly dejected. One Saturday, I decided to confront Alan. I waited for him in the living room, my nerves taut with anticipation. When he walked through the door, his eyes flickered with surprise at seeing me awake. "Alan, we need to talk. About us. About Sophie." I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He sighed, a sound of exasperation, and tossed his keys on the table. What now, Laura? I'm tired. It's about Sophie. She needs her father. She's been through so much, and you've just been absent. Alan scoffed, his expression hardening. So what? I provide for this family. Isn't that enough? I don't have time for this melodrama. Melodrama? I felt a surge of anger. Our daughter was in a hospital bed, scared and alone, and you couldn't even spare a moment for her? Alan shrugged, an infuriatingly nonchalant gesture. She's your responsibility. I have more important things to deal with. His words stung, a bitter confirmation of his detachment from the family we once cherished. Is your job really more important than your own daughter's well-being? I'm doing this for our future, Laura. You wouldn't understand, he retorted, turning away from me. I watched him walk away, a growing realization dawning on me. Alan was no longer the man I married. He had become a stranger, his heart hardened by ambition and apathy. That night, as I lay beside Sophie, her soft breathing a comfort in the darkness, I knew that our family was beyond repair. Alan's neglect had not only hurt me, but it had also wounded Sophie, an innocent caught in the crossfire of his indifference. A plan began to form in my mind, a resolve to protect my daughter from further hurt. Alan had shown us his true colors, and it was time for me to act. No longer would I stand by and watch as he tore our family apart. The days turned into weeks, and the Cold War at home raged on. Alan's indifference was like a thick fog that refused to lift. Sophie's attempts to engage with her father were met with stony silence or curt replies. The once joyful atmosphere of our home had turned stifling, filled with unspoken resentments and hurtful silences. One afternoon, as I was tidying Alan's study, a piece of paper slipped out from a book. It was a receipt for a jewelry store, dated 2 weeks ago. The item listed was a woman's bracelet, expensive and elegant. A knot formed in my stomach. I had never seen this bracelet, nor had Alan mentioned buying any jewelry. The receipt ignited a flicker of suspicion. Was there someone else? My mind raced with the implications. I needed to know more, to understand what was happening. Determined, I called my friend Miranda, who worked at a law firm. Miranda, I think Alan might be having an affair. I found a receipt for a bracelet that I've never seen. There was a pause, and then Miranda's voice, firm and supportive. Laura, I can recommend a private investigator. They're discreet and can help you find out what's going on. I agreed. It was a drastic step, but I had to know the truth. Weeks passed, and the investigator provided updates. Photos of Alan with a younger woman, dates and times of their meetings, even a recording of a conversation where he spoke tenderly to her. Each piece of evidence was a blow to my heart, a confirmation of my worst fears. One evening, with Sophie at a friend's house, I confronted Alan. The photos lay scattered on the table, undeniable proof of his betrayal. Alan, who is she? My voice trembled, a mix of anger and pain. He froze, his eyes darting to the photos. Where did you get these? He stammered. That's not important. Answer me. Who is she? Alan's face hardened, his usual indifference replaced by a defensive anger. It's none of your business. I have my life. You have yours. My business, I laughed bitterly. You're my husband, Alan. Or have you forgotten? He sneered, a cruel twist to his lips. I haven't forgotten, Laura, but let's be honest, our marriage has been dead for years. I found someone who understands me, who appreciates me. His words cut deep, but I stood my ground. And what about Sophie? Does she fit into this new life of yours? Alan shrugged, a dismissive, heartless gesture. Sophie's your daughter. You deal with her. The finality in his voice was a revelation. Alan had checked out of our marriage, out of his role as a father. He had moved on, leaving us behind like discarded memories. Tears of frustration and grief blurred my vision. You've abandoned us, Alan, for a fling. Is she worth losing your family? Alan didn't answer, just turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the shattered pieces of our life. That night, I lay in bed, a plan forming in my mind. Alan had chosen his path, and now I would choose mine. For Sophie, for our future. Alan would learn that his actions had consequences, that he couldn't just discard us without a fight. I would make sure of it. The discovery of Alan's affair was like a poison seeping through the remnants of our family life. Each day that followed was a reminder of his betrayal. Sophie, sensing the tension, became increasingly withdrawn. her bright spirit dimmed by the growing rift within our home. It was a crisp autumn evening when I decided to confront Alan again. He had just returned from work, and the air between us was thick with unspoken words. "Alan, we need to talk about the divorce," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He looked at me, his expression one of annoyance. "So you've decided to play that card? Fine, let's get it over with." The casualness of his response infuriated me. "This is not a game, Alan. You've destroyed our family. You've hurt your own daughter with your selfishness," Alan scoffed, leaning against the doorframe. "Don't be melodramatic, Laura. It's just a divorce. People go through it all the time." "Just a divorce?" I echoed, incredulous. "You cheat, you lie, and now you act as if it's nothing?" A gesture that fueled my anger. "It is what it is. I've moved on. You should too." Moved on. The words echoed in my mind, a stark reminder of how far we had drifted apart. "What about Sophie? Did you even think about her in all this?" Alan's expression hardened. "Sophie will be fine. She's your daughter after all." The implication of his words hit me like a slap. "What do you mean by your daughter?" "She's our daughter, Alan." He smirked, a cruel twist to his lips. "Let's not kid ourselves, Laura. We both know that's not true." His insinuation left me reeling. The implication that Sophie wasn't his daughter was absurd, a desperate attempt to justify his actions. "You're delusional, Alan. Sophie is your daughter, and you've just abandoned her." Alan's expression shifted to one of disdain. "Believe what you want, Laura. I'm done with this conversation." As he walked away, I realized that the man I had married, the father of my child, was a stranger to me. His heart was clouded by lies and selfishness, his actions driven by a disregard for the family we once had. That night, as I lay in bed, a determination took root in my heart. Alan had chosen his path, and it was time for me to choose mine. I would fight for Sophie, for our dignity, for justice. Alan had to face the consequences of his actions. It was time for him to understand the pain he had inflicted on us, the damage he had done to our family, and I was going to make sure he did. The morning sun cast a pale light across the kitchen where I sat, legal documents spread out before me. Today was the day I would confront Alan with everything, the evidence of his affair, his lies, everything laid bare. My heart raced with a mix of fear and determination. Sophie had left for school, her eyes still shadowed with the remnants of our fractured family life. The house was eerily silent, a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. When Alan finally entered, he was taken aback by the sight of the documents. "What's all this?" he asked, his tone wary. "These are divorce papers, Alan, and evidence of your affair," I replied, my voice steady. He scoffed, glancing at the papers with disdain. "So you're going through with this. You think you can threaten me?" "This is not a threat, Alan. It's a consequence of your actions," I said firmly. Alan picked up a photo from the pile, his face paling as he recognized the woman with him. "Where did you get these?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is that you've been lying and cheating, and now you're going to face the consequences." Alan's facade of indifference cracked, revealing a flicker of panic. "You can't prove anything with these photos. They prove nothing." "I have more than photos, Alan. I have testimonies, receipts, everything. You can't deny it anymore." For a moment he looked cornered like an animal caught in a trap. Then his expression shifted to one of arrogance. "Fine, let's get divorced. I don't care. I'm done with this sham of a marriage." His words were like daggers, but I refused to let them wound me. "It's not just about the divorce, Alan. It's about Sophie. You've hurt her, abandoned her." Alan snorted, a sound of contempt. "Sophie has always been your daughter more than mine. I have no obligation towards her." His callousness was a blow, but I stood my ground. "You are her father, Alan. You can't just abandon her because it's convenient for you." Alan's eyes narrowed, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "We'll see about that. I have my lawyers. They'll make sure I don't have to pay a dime for a child that might not even be mine." The accusation was a shock, but I refused to let it shake me. "Sophie is your daughter, Alan. You know that. Your lies won't change the truth." Alan didn't respond, just turned and left the room, his steps heavy with the weight of his deceit. As he disappeared, I knew that this battle was just beginning. Alan had shown his true colors, and I was ready to fight back. For Sophie, for our dignity, for justice. He would not get away with his betrayal. Not without a fight. The day of the court hearing dawned, gray and overcast, mirroring the turmoil in my heart. As I sat in the sterile courtroom, my hands clenched in my lap, I felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. Today, Alan would be held accountable for his actions. Alan sat across the room, his expression one of smug confidence. He seemed to believe he could charm his way out of any situation, even this. But the evidence was irrefutable. When the judge called the session to order, my lawyer presented the case with precision. The affair, the neglect, the emotional trauma inflicted on Sophie and me. Alan's lawyer tried to counter, painting him as a devoted father and husband, a victim of circumstance. It was a desperate, flimsy defense. As Alan took the stand, his demeanor was one of practiced innocence. These accusations are baseless. I've always provided for my family. This is just a vindictive move by my wife. His words made my blood boil, but I remained silent, letting the evidence speak for itself. When my turn came, I spoke from the heart. Alan abandoned us, emotionally and physically. He was never there for Sophie when she needed him the most. His affair was the final betrayal. Alan's face twisted in anger as I spoke, but he remained silent, knowing any outburst would only harm his case. After hours of testimonies and deliberations, the judge delivered the verdict. Alan was found guilty of marital misconduct. He was ordered to pay a substantial amount in child support and alimony. The justice of it was a small balm to my wounded heart, but the true victory came outside the courtroom. As we exited, reporters swarmed around us, drawn by the scandal of a prominent businessman caught in an affair. Alan's face was a mask of fury as he pushed through the crowd, his reputation tarnished by his own actions. I watched him go, a sense of closure filling me. He had lost more than just the case today. He had lost his dignity, his respectability. As I drove home, a sense of peace settled over me. The legal battle was over, but the fight for a new life for Sophie and me was just beginning. We would rebuild, step by step, leaving the shadows of the past behind. Alan had faced the consequences of his actions, and now it was time for us to move forward, into a future filled with hope and healing. Months had passed since the court ruling. The divorce was final, and with it came a sense of liberation. Sophie and I had started to rebuild our lives, piece by piece, finding joy in the small moments that we once took for granted. I had returned to work, embracing the challenges and satisfaction it brought. Sophie, now more resilient and mature, was excelling in school, her laughter once again a regular melody in our home. But the true retribution came unexpectedly. One evening, as Sophie and I were finishing dinner, a news report caught our attention. The screen showed Alan, his face haggard, his once confident posture now deflated. The reporter's voice narrated the downfall of the once respected businessman. Alan Thompson, facing multiple lawsuits for unethical business practices and sexual harassment, has been ousted from his company. His assets have been frozen pending investigation. Sophie looked at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Mom, is that true?" I nodded, a complex mix of emotions swirling within me. "Yes, it seems your father's actions have caught up with him." The report continued, detailing Alan's rapid fall from grace. His affair had been the catalyst, but his unethical behavior in business had been his undoing. His reputation was in ruins, his career over. Sophie reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "I feel sorry for him, Mom. He's lost everything." I squeezed back, proud of her compassionate heart. "It's a hard lesson, Sophie. Actions have consequences. He made his choices, and now he must face them." In the days that followed, Alan's downfall became the talk of the town. He tried to reach out to us, emails and messages filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. But Sophie and I were firm in our resolve. We had moved on, leaving the pain he had caused behind. The final blow came when Alan's mother, my former mother-in-law, came to visit. She had been supportive throughout the ordeal, her disappointment in her son palpable. "Laura, I'm sorry for everything. Alan has lost his way and I can't support his actions. You and Sophie have shown incredible strength," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "Thank you," I replied, grateful for her support. "We're moving forward, focusing on the future." As she left, I watched Sophie playing in the yard, her laughter a balm to my soul. We had weathered the storm, emerging stronger and more united. Alan's downfall was his own making, a result of his choices and actions. For us, it was a chance to start anew, free from the shadows of betrayal and deceit. In the end, justice had prevailed, not just in the courtroom, but but in the karmic retribution that life had dealt Alan. Sophie and I, hand in hand, stepped into our new life, filled with hope and the promise of brighter days. The sterile white of the hospital room was supposed to symbolize a beginning, but for me it felt like the end. "He looks just like you, Alex," I said, a forced chuckle hiding my trembling voice. Nathan's and Melissa's eyes snapped to mine, a symphony of denial in their reaction. "Ridiculous, Laura. What are you saying?" Nathan's laugh was too sharp, too quick. Melissa just shook her head, avoiding my gaze. Our life had been simple before this. Nathan, Ava, and I in our cozy home, living what I thought was a happy existence. When Melissa, Nathan's sister-in-law, struggled to conceive, we all felt her pain. Her eventual pregnancy was a joy we all shared, or so I believed. Walking into the hospital that day, I expected to feel nothing but happiness. But Nathan's attention wasn't on his niece or nephew. It was fixated on Melissa in a way that clawed at my insides. "Melissa did great, didn't she?" he kept saying, his voice soft, tender even. It was a tone I hadn't heard in years, not since Ava was born. The drive home was silent. Nathan's mind seemed miles away, and I couldn't stop the gnawing feeling in my gut that something was deeply wrong. A few days later, Derek, Melissa's husband, came over. Our daughters played together as we sat, nursing our coffees. "Nathan's been a great support to Melissa," he started, his voice trailing off. "Yeah, he's been amazing," I replied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Derek looked at me, his eyes searching. "Laura, do you think it's normal how close Nathan and Melissa have become?" I wanted to scream, to tell him it wasn't. But fear, a constant companion these days, kept me silent. The next few weeks were a blur of Nathan's late nights and my growing suspicions. He was always texting, smiling at his phone in a way he hadn't smiled at me in months. "It's just work, Laura. You know how it is." He'd dismiss my concerns, but the seed of doubt had already taken root. One evening I found lipstick on his collar, a shade I never wore. "It's nothing, a misunderstanding," Nathan said, his voice calm, too calm. But his eyes, they couldn't meet mine. I lay awake that night, listening to his steady breaths, feeling the chasm between us widen. The man I married, the father of my child, was a stranger to me now. The thought of confronting him, of hearing him admit to an affair with Melissa, was too much to bear. So I chose silence, a silent witness to my own heartbreak. The days turned into weeks, each one heavier than the last. Nathan's visits to Melissa became more frequent, his excuses more flimsy. "She needs help with the baby," he'd say. But Ava had never needed him like that. Our daughter had grown up barely knowing her father's touch, his affection. It was all reserved for Melissa now. Derek and I started talking more, sharing our fears and doubts. "I think they're having an affair," he finally said one day, his voice heavy with resignation. The words hung in the air, a confirmation of my worst fears. "What do we do now?" I asked, feeling defeated, lost. "We need proof," Derek replied, determination in his voice. "For our peace of mind, for the sake of our families." So we decided to hire a detective to shine a light on the deceit that had crept into our lives. It was a step into the unknown, a final acknowledgement that the life I thought I had was nothing but a lie. As I lay in bed that night, Nathan's silent form beside me, I couldn't help but wonder how we got here. The love we shared, the dreams we built, how had it all come to this? The answer, I feared, was lying right beside me, hidden behind closed eyes and a facade of innocence. 2 weeks had passed since Derek and I made the decision to uncover the truth. Each day felt like a march through a minefield, each step threatening to blow up the facade of our lives. Derek came over with the detective's first report. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice steady, but his hands betraying a slight tremor. "As I'll ever be," I replied, feeling anything but ready. We sat at the kitchen table, the sounds of our children playing outside a stark contrast to the tension between us. He opened the envelope, and we pored over the photos and texts. Nathan and Melissa at a cafe, their heads close together, laughing. Another photo showed them shopping, Nathan's hand lightly touching Melissa's back. The texts were even more damning, filled with endearments and plans to meet up when they knew Derek and I would be occupied. "I can't believe this," I whispered, the words like shards of glass in my throat. "How could they do this to us?" Derek's face was a mask of pain and anger. "We confront them, together." The confrontation was planned for the next evening at our house. The waiting was excruciating, time stretching out, each second heavy with dread and anger. Finally, they arrived. Nathan and Melissa, looking too comfortable in their deceit. We sat in the living room, the air thick with tension. Derek wasted no time. "We know about the affair," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. Melissa's face went white, while Nathan's expression hardened. "What affair?" Nathan's voice was cold, dismissive. "Don't play dumb, Nathan," I said, finding my voice. "We have proof." I threw the photos and texts on the coffee table in front of them. Melissa picked up one of the photos, her hands shaking. "It's not what it looks like," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "Really? Because it looks like you're betraying your family." Derek's voice rose, his anger palpable. Nathan stood up, his demeanor changing. "You're overreacting. We're just close, that's all." "Close?" I echoed, disbelief and anger coursing through me. "You call this being just close?" I pointed at a photo of them kissing. "It was a mistake," Melissa finally admitted, tears starting to form in her eyes. "A mistake?" Derek laughed bitterly. "How many times do you mistake your way into my wife's arms, Nathan?" Nathan was silent, his facade crumbling. "We're going to sort this out," I said, my voice steady with resolve. "You two need to decide where your loyalties lie, with each other or with your families." The room was silent, the only sound Melissa's quiet sobbing. Nathan looked at me, then at Derek, a mix of defiance and guilt in his eyes. "This isn't over," Derek said, standing up. "We'll be seeking legal advice." Nathan and Melissa left without another word, the gap between us now a chasm too wide to ever bridge again. After they left, Derek and I sat in silence, the weight of our discovery settling around us like a shroud. "What now?" I finally asked, my voice hollow. "Now, we rebuild. Without them," Derek replied, his voice firm but his eyes showing the pain of betrayal. We agreed to proceed with the divorces, a decision that felt like signing a death warrant to the life we thought we had. But there was no going back. The shadows of doubt had lifted, revealing the ugly truth beneath. As Derek left, he turned to me, a sad smile on his face. "We'll get through this, Laura, for our kids." I nodded, watching him walk away, feeling the solidarity between us. We were united in our betrayal, but also in our determination to rise from the ashes of our broken marriages. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but we were ready to face them. Together, we would seek our revenge, not through petty acts, but by reclaiming our lives and showing Nathan and Melissa that we were stronger than their deceit. The day of the confrontation had arrived. Derek and I had arranged to meet Nathan and Melissa at Derek's house, a neutral ground laden with memories of better days. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin crawl and your heart beat out of your chest. Nathan and Melissa sat across from us, a gulf of betrayal between. Their faces were masks of apprehension, a stark contrast to Derek's steely resolve and my simmering anger. Derek didn't waste a moment. "We've seen the evidence. Now we want to hear it from you. What's been going on?" His voice was calm, but the underlying fury was palpable. Melissa glanced at Nathan, a silent plea for support. Nathan cleared his throat, his usual confidence nowhere in sight. "We didn't mean for this to happen," he began, his voice a mere shadow of its former self. "It just did." "Just did?" I echoed, incredulity lacing my tone. "You make it sound like an accident." "It was a mistake," Melissa interjected, her voice trembling. "We never meant to hurt anyone." "A mistake?" Derek's laughter was bitter, filled with scorn. "You call destroying our families a mistake?" Nathan looked at me, desperation in his eyes. "Laura, Don't." I cut him off, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Don't you dare try to justify your actions to me." The room fell silent, the tension a tangible entity that wrapped around us, suffocating. Derek leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Nathan and Melissa. "We're done here. We've heard enough." "But what about us? What about our families?" Melissa's plea was met with a cold, hard truth from Derek. "There is no us anymore. You two made sure of that." His words were final, a door slamming shut on any hope of reconciliation. As Nathan and Melissa left, the reality of our situation sank in. The betrayal was out in the open, but it did little to ease the pain. If anything, it amplified it, each word from Nathan and Melissa a knife twisting deeper. Derek and I sat in silence, the aftermath of the confrontation settling around us like dust after a storm. "What now?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Now we move forward, Derek replied, his voice firm. We start the divorce proceedings, and we make sure they understand the gravity of what they've done. I nodded, the path ahead clear but daunting. This was just the beginning. Nathan and Melissa had to face the consequences of their actions, not just in our broken hearts, but in their shattered realities. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings and paperwork, a constant reminder of the betrayal. But amidst the chaos, a resolve solidified within me. Nathan and Melissa would not get away with tearing our families apart without facing the repercussions. Derek and I were in constant communication, our bond strengthened by our shared resolve for justice. They won't know what hit them, Derek said during one of our strategy meetings. His determination was infectious, a beacon of strength in the overwhelming darkness. The day we filed for divorce was somber, yet there was an undercurrent of empowerment. We were taking control, no longer victims of Nathan and Melissa's selfish desires. As I signed the papers, my hands steady, I couldn't help but think about the journey ahead. It would be fraught with challenges, but I was ready to reclaim my life, to show Nathan that he hadn't broken me. I was stronger than his betrayal, and I would emerge from this ordeal not just intact, but reborn. The battle lines were drawn, and this was just the beginning. Nathan and Melissa would soon learn that their actions had consequences, and Derek and I were just getting started. The legal battle was in full swing. Derek and I sat across from our respective lawyers in a conference room that felt too cold, too impersonal for the storm of emotions brewing inside me. We were about to discuss our strategy for the upcoming court sessions, a plan that would ensure Nathan and Melissa felt the full weight of their betrayal. Our primary focus is on the financial repercussions and the custody arrangements, Derek's lawyer began, his voice all business. We have a strong case, given the evidence of infidelity and the impact on your families. I nodded, my mind racing. The thought of Nathan and Melissa squirming in their seats, faced with the cold, hard facts of their actions, gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. Derek leaned in, his voice low but fierce. We're not just going for a simple divorce settlement. We want to make sure they understand the pain they've caused, financially and emotionally. The lawyers outlined the strategy, including demands for alimony, child support, and even punitive damages for emotional distress. With each point they made, I felt a step closer to justice, a step closer to making Nathan and Melissa pay for the havoc they'd wreaked. As we wrapped up the meeting, my lawyer handed me a stack of documents. These are the filings for the court. Once these are processed, it's only a matter of time. I took the documents, the weight of them in my hands, symbolizing the gravity of the situation. Thank you, I said, my voice steady. I want them to regret ever crossing us. The day of the first court session arrived. Nathan and Melissa were already seated when Derek and I walked in, their faces a mix of defiance and nervousness. As we took our seats, I caught Nathan's eye, his gaze quickly shifting away, unable to hold mine. The proceedings were a blur, the lawyers presenting the evidence, arguing our cases with clinical precision. Nathan and Melissa's lawyer tried to downplay the affair, painting it as a momentary lapse in judgment, but the evidence spoke louder than his words. During a recess, I stepped outside for air, the weight of the courtroom suffocating. Nathan followed, a desperate look on his face. Laura, can't we talk about this? There has to be another way, he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. I turned to him, my resolve as strong as ever. Talk? After everything you've done? You're delusional, Nathan. He reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. You'll pay for what you've done, both financially and by losing us. You've already lost everything that mattered. Returning to the courtroom, I felt empowered, my path clear. Nathan and Melissa had chosen their fate the moment they betrayed our trust, and now they were facing the consequences. As the judge announced a recess until the next session, Derek and I shared a look of determination. This was far from over, but we were on the right track. Nathan and Melissa's lawyer seemed rattled, a sign that our strategy was working. Outside the courtroom, Derek and I discussed our next steps. They think they can get away with a slap on the wrist. We'll show them how wrong they are, Derek said, anger lacing his voice. I nodded, the fire of revenge burning brighter within me. They'll regret the day they decided to betray us. This is just the beginning. As we left the courthouse, the cold air felt invigorating, a stark contrast to the heated emotions inside. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready for the fight. Nathan and Melissa would learn the hard way that actions have consequences, and Derek and I were the harbingers of their reckoning. The days leading up to the final court session were filled with a tense anticipation. Derek and I had become fixtures in each other's lives, our shared quest for justice, a bond that was unbreakable. We spent hours poring over documents and strategizing with our lawyers, determined to leave no stone unturned. On the eve of the final session, Derek called me. "Tomorrow's it, Laura. Are you ready?" "As I'll ever be," I replied, my voice tinged with a mix of nerves and determination. "We've got this. They won't know what hit them," he said, his confidence bolstering my spirits. The courtroom was packed the next day, a silent audience to the final act of our drama. Nathan and Melissa sat together, a united front that belied the cracks in their facade. As the session began, our lawyer presented our closing arguments with precision and unwavering conviction. He laid out the financial demands, the request for sole custody, and the punitive damages for the emotional toll their actions had taken on us. Nathan's lawyer attempted a rebuttal, arguing for leniency and a more equitable division of assets. My clients regret their actions, but they shouldn't be financially ruined because of a personal mistake. Derek leaned over to me, whispering, "A personal mistake? They call destroying families a mistake?" I couldn't help but scoff quietly, the absurdity of their defense clear as day. Then it was Melissa's turn to speak. She stood, her voice shaky. "I know we've caused pain, and I'm truly sorry for that. But please, think of the financial consequences. We have a child to think about." Her plea hung in the air, but my heart had hardened against their excuses. They thought of consequences only when faced with them, not when they embarked on their affair. Finally, Nathan stood. "I've made mistakes, but I'm asking for a chance to make things right. Don't let this mistake define our entire lives." The judge listened intently, his expression unreadable. After what felt like an eternity, he announced he would deliver his decision. The wait was agonizing, each tick of the clock a reminder of what was at stake. When the judge returned, the room fell silent. He began to speak, his voice firm. "After careful consideration, the court has decided to grant the plaintiff's requests for alimony, child support, and partial punitive damages. The betrayal and its impact on the families cannot be overlooked." A gasp went through the room, Nathan and Melissa's faces turning pale. The judge continued, outlining the financial ramifications and the custody arrangements that favored Derek and me. As the judge concluded, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Justice had been served, not just in words but in actions that would ensure Nathan and Melissa felt the consequences of their betrayal. Outside the courthouse, Derek and I shared a moment of quiet victory. "We did it," he said, a smile breaking through the exhaustion. "We did," I replied, the reality of our victory sinking in. They finally got what they deserved. As we parted ways, I felt a chapter of my life closing. The pain of betrayal would always be a part of me, but so would the strength I found in standing up for myself. Nathan and Melissa's downfall was a testament to karma's unyielding grip. They had chosen their path, and now they were forced to walk it, burdened by the financial and emotional weight of their choices. The drive home was reflective, a mix of sadness for what was lost and hope for what lay ahead. The battle was over, but the war for my own peace and happiness was just beginning. I was ready to face it head-on, armed with the knowledge that justice, in the end, always finds a way. In the aftermath of the court's decision, the world seemed to shift on its axis. The victory was bittersweet, the taste of justice mingled with the remnants of a life unraveled. Yet, amidst the rubble of broken relationships and shattered trust, a new resolve took root within me. The first signs of Nathan and Melissa's unraveling came swiftly. Nathan, burdened by the financial obligations imposed by the court, reached out in a desperate attempt to renegotiate the terms. "I can't afford this, Laura. It's going to ruin me," he pleaded over the phone, his voice a mix of desperation and disbelief. "The court has made its decision, Nathan. You should have thought about the consequences before," I replied, my voice steady, devoid of the warmth it once held for him. "But what about Ava? What about our family?" His attempt to tug at my heartstrings fell flat. the mention of our daughter igniting a protective fierceness within me. Our family was broken the moment you chose Melissa over us. You're facing the consequences of your actions now, I said, hanging up before he could respond. The finality in my voice marked the end of our conversation, and in many ways, the end of our connection. Melissa, too, faced her comeuppance. With Nathan's finances in disarray, she found herself grappling with the reality of raising their child without the lavish lifestyle she was accustomed to. Her complaints filled the air, reaching me through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances who still lingered on the fringes of my life. "It's not fair. This isn't the life I signed up for," she lamented to anyone who would listen, her voice tinged with bitterness and regret. The schadenfreude I felt was tempered by a hint of pity, not for Melissa, but for the innocent child caught in the crossfire of adult folly. Derek and I, through our shared ordeal, had grown closer, our conversations a blend of commiseration and burgeoning friendship. One evening, over coffee, he shared a piece of news that felt like the final nail in the coffin of Nathan and Melissa's deceit. "They're struggling to make ends meet. Melissa's been looking for work, and Nathan's second job barely covers the alimony and child support," Derek said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice that mirrored my own. "It's the bed they made. Now they have to lie in it," I responded, the sentiment echoing the harsh reality of their situation. Our dialogue was interrupted by Ava's laughter, a sound that brought home the reason for all our struggles. Derek's daughter, too, found joy in the simple moments we shared, her presence a balm to the wounds of the past. As the days turned into weeks, the tangible outcomes of our legal victory became evident. Nathan and Melissa's facade of unity crumbled under the weight of financial strain and public scrutiny. Their attempts to maintain a semblance of normalcy were met with the cold, hard truth of their actions and the repercussions that followed. In the midst of their downfall, Derek and I found a semblance of peace. Our meetings, once dominated by strategies for legal battles, now gave way to conversations about healing and moving forward. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Derek mused one afternoon as we watched our children play in the park, their laughter a testament to their resilience. "We have," I agreed, allowing myself a moment to reflect on the journey. "And we'll keep moving forward, for them and for ourselves." The chapter of betrayal and revenge had closed, leaving behind lessons learned and strength gained. Nathan and Melissa's descent was a testament to the power of karma, a reminder that actions always have consequences. For Derek and I, the path ahead was clearer, paved with the promise of new beginnings and the determination to build a future defined not by the past, but by the possibilities that lay ahead. The sterile white of the hospital room was supposed to symbolize a beginning, but for me it felt like the end. "He looks just like you, Alex," I said, a forced chuckle hiding my trembling voice. Nathan's and Melissa's eyes snapped to mine, a symphony of denial in their reaction. "Ridiculous, Laura. What are you saying?" Nathan's laugh was too sharp, too quick. Melissa just shook her head, avoiding my gaze. Our life had been simple before this. Nathan, Ava, and I in our cozy home, living what I thought was a happy existence. When Melissa, Nathan's sister-in-law, struggled to conceive, we all felt her pain. Her eventual pregnancy was a joy we all shared, or so I believed. Walking into the hospital that day, I expected to feel nothing but happiness. But Nathan's attention wasn't on his niece or nephew. It was fixated on Melissa in a way that clawed at my insides. "Melissa did great, didn't she?" he kept saying, his voice soft, tender even. It was a tone I hadn't heard in years, not since Ava was born. The drive home was silent. Nathan's mind seemed miles away, and I couldn't stop the gnawing feeling in my gut that something was deeply wrong. A few days later, Derek, Melissa's husband, came over. Our daughters played together as we sat, nursing our coffees. "Nathan's been a great support to Melissa," he started, his voice trailing off. "Yeah, he's been amazing," I replied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Derek looked at me, his eyes searching. "Laura, do you think it's normal how close Nathan and Melissa have become?" I wanted to scream, to tell him it wasn't. But fear, a constant companion these days, kept me silent. The next few weeks were a blur of Nathan's late nights and my growing suspicions. He was always texting, smiling at his phone in a way he hadn't smiled at me in months. "It's just work, Laura. You know how it is," he'd dismiss my concerns, but the seed of doubt had already taken root. One evening I found lipstick on his collar, a shade I never wore. "It's nothing, a misunderstanding," Nathan said, his voice calm, too calm. But his eyes, they couldn't meet mine. I lay awake that night, listening to his steady breaths, feeling the chasm between us widen. The man I married, the father of my child, was a stranger to me now. The thought of confronting him, of hearing him admit to an affair with Melissa, was too much to bear. So I chose silence. A silent witness to my own heartbreak. The days turned into weeks, each one heavier than the last. Nathan's visits to Melissa became more frequent, his excuses more flimsy. "She needs help with the baby," he'd say. But Ava had never needed him like that. Our daughter had grown up barely knowing her father's touch, his affection. It was all reserved for Melissa now. Derek and I started talking more, sharing our fears and doubts. "I think they're having an affair," he finally said one day, his voice heavy with resignation. The words hung in the air, a confirmation of my worst fears. "What do we do now?" I asked, feeling defeated, lost. "We need proof," Derek replied, determination in his voice. "For our peace of mind, for the sake of our families." So we decided to hire a detective to shine a light on the deceit that had crept into our lives. It was a step into the unknown, a final acknowledgement that the life I thought I had was nothing but a lie. As I lay in bed that night, Nathan's silent form beside me, I couldn't help but wonder how we got here. The love we shared, the dreams we built, how had it all come to this? The answer, I feared, was lying right beside me, hidden behind closed eyes and a facade of innocence. 2 weeks had passed since Derek and I made the decision to uncover the truth. Each day felt like a march through a minefield, each step threatening to blow up the facade of our lives. Derek came over with the detective's first report. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice steady, but his hands betraying a slight tremor. "As I'll ever be," I replied, feeling anything but ready. We sat at the kitchen table, the sounds of our children playing outside a stark contrast to the tension between us. He opened the envelope, and we pored over the photos and texts. Nathan and Melissa at a cafe, their heads close together, laughing. Another photo showed them shopping, Nathan's hand lightly touching Melissa's back. The texts were even more damning, filled with endearments and plans to meet up when they knew Derek and I would be occupied. "I can't believe this," I whispered, the words like shards of glass in my throat. "How could they do this to us?" Derek's face was a mask of pain and anger. We confront them, together. The confrontation was planned for the next evening at our house. The waiting was excruciating, time stretching out, each second heavy with dread and anger. Finally, they arrived. Nathan and Melissa, looking too comfortable in their deceit. We sat in the living room, the air thick with tension. Derek wasted no time. "We know about the affair," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. Melissa's face went white, while Nathan's expression hardened. "What affair?" Nathan's voice was cold, dismissive. "Don't play dumb, Nathan," I said, finding my voice. "We have proof." I threw the photos and texts on the coffee table in front of them. Melissa picked up one of the photos, her hands shaking. "It's not what it looks like," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "Really? Because it looks like you're betraying your family." Derek's voice rose, his anger palpable. Nathan stood up, his demeanor changing. "You're overreacting. We're just close, that's all." "Close?" I echoed, disbelief and anger coursing through me. "You call this being just close?" I pointed at a photo of them kissing. "It was a mistake," Melissa finally admitted, tears starting to form in her eyes. "A mistake?" Derek laughed bitterly. "How many times do you mistake your way into my wife's arms, Nathan?" Nathan was silent, his facade crumbling. "We're going to sort this out," I said, my voice steady with resolve. "You two need to decide where your loyalties lie, with each other or with your families." The room was silent, the only sound Melissa's quiet sobbing. Nathan looked at me, then at Derek, a mix of defiance and guilt in his eyes. "This isn't over," Derek said, standing up. "We'll be seeking legal advice." Nathan and Melissa left without another word, the gap between us now a chasm too wide to ever bridge again. After they left, Derek and I sat in silence, the weight of our discovery settling around us like a shroud. "What now?" I finally asked, my voice hollow. "Now, we rebuild. Without them," Derek replied, his voice firm but his eyes showing the pain of betrayal. We agreed to proceed with the divorces, a decision that felt like signing a death warrant to the life we thought we had. But there was no going back. The shadows of doubt had lifted, revealing the ugly truth beneath. As Derek left, he turned to me, a sad smile on his face. "We'll get through this, Laura, for our kids." I nodded, watching him walk away, feeling the solidarity between us. We were united in our betrayal, but also in our determination to rise from the ashes of our broken marriages. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but we were ready to face them. Together, we would seek our revenge, not through petty acts, but by reclaiming our lives and showing Nathan and Melissa that we were stronger than their deceit. The day of the confrontation had arrived. Derek and I had arranged to meet Nathan and Melissa at Derek's house, a neutral ground laden with memories of better days. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin crawl and your heart beat out of your chest. Nathan and Melissa sat across from us, a gulf of betrayal between. Their faces were masks of apprehension, a stark contrast to Derek's steely resolve and my simmering anger. Derek didn't waste a moment. "We've seen the evidence. Now we want to hear it from you. What's been going on?" His voice was calm, but the underlying fury was palpable. Melissa glanced at Nathan, a silent plea for support. Nathan cleared his throat, his usual confidence nowhere in sight. "We didn't mean for this to happen," he began, his voice a mere shadow of its former self. "It just did." "Just did?" I echoed, incredulity lacing my tone. "You make it sound like an accident." "It was a mistake," Melissa interjected, her voice trembling. "We never meant to hurt anyone." "A mistake?" Derek's laughter was bitter, filled with scorn. "You call destroying our families a mistake?" Nathan looked at me, desperation in his eyes. "Laura, Don't." I cut him off, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Don't you dare try to justify your actions to me." The room fell silent, the tension a tangible entity that wrapped around us, suffocating. Derek leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Nathan and Melissa. "We're done here. We've heard enough." "But what about us? What about our families?" Melissa's plea was met with a cold, hard truth from Derek. "There is no us anymore. You two made sure of that." His words were final, a door slamming shut on any hope of reconciliation. As Nathan and Melissa left, the reality of our situation sank in. The betrayal was out in the open, but it did little to ease the pain. If anything, it amplified it, each word from Nathan and Melissa a knife twisting deeper. Derek and I sat in silence, the aftermath of the confrontation settling around us like dust after a storm. "What now?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Now we move forward," Derek replied, his voice firm. "We start the divorce proceedings, and we make sure they understand the gravity of what they've done." I nodded, the path ahead clear but daunting. This was just the beginning. Nathan and Melissa had to face the consequences of their actions, not just in our broken hearts, but in their shattered realities. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings and paperwork, a constant reminder of the betrayal. But amidst the chaos, a resolve solidified within me. Nathan and Melissa would not get away with tearing our families apart without facing the repercussions. Derek and I were in constant communication, our bond strengthened by our shared resolve for justice. "They won't know what hit them," Derek said during one of our strategy meetings. His determination was infectious, a beacon of strength in the overwhelming darkness. The day we filed for divorce was somber, yet there was an undercurrent of empowerment. We were taking control, no longer victims of Nathan and Melissa's selfish desires. As I signed the papers, my hands steady, I couldn't help but think about the journey ahead. It would be fraught with challenges, but I was ready to reclaim my life, to show Nathan that he hadn't broken me. I was stronger than his betrayal, and I would emerge from this ordeal not just intact, but reborn. The battle lines were drawn, and this was just the beginning. Nathan and Melissa would soon learn that their actions had consequences, and Derek and I were just getting started. The legal battle was in full swing. Derek and I sat across from our respective lawyers in a conference room that felt too cold, too impersonal for the storm of emotions brewing inside me. We were about to discuss our strategy for the upcoming court sessions, a plan that would ensure Nathan and Melissa felt the full weight of their betrayal. "Our primary focus is on the financial repercussions and the custody arrangements," Derek's lawyer began, his voice all business. We have a strong case, given the evidence of infidelity and the impact on your families. I nodded, my mind racing. The thought of Nathan and Melissa squirming in their seats, faced with the cold, hard facts of their actions, gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. Derek leaned in, his voice low but fierce. We're not just going for a simple divorce settlement. We want to make sure they understand the pain they've caused, financially and emotionally. The lawyers outlined the strategy, including demands for alimony, child support, and even punitive damages for emotional distress. With each point they made, I felt a step closer to justice, a step closer to making Nathan and Melissa pay for the havoc they'd wreaked. As we wrapped up the meeting, my lawyer handed me a stack of documents. These are the filings for the court. Once these are processed, it's only a matter of time. I took the documents, the weight of them in my hands symbolizing the gravity of the situation. Thank you, I said, my voice steady. I want them to regret ever crossing us. The day of the first court session arrived. Nathan and Melissa were already seated when Derek and I walked in, their faces a mix of defiance and nervousness. As we took our seats, I caught Nathan's eye, his gaze quickly shifting away, unable to hold mine. The proceedings were a blur, the lawyers presenting the evidence, arguing our cases with clinical precision. Nathan and Melissa's lawyer tried to downplay the affair, painting it as a momentary lapse in judgment, but the evidence spoke louder than his words. During a recess, I stepped outside for air, the weight of the courtroom suffocating. Nathan followed, a desperate look on his face. Laura, can't we talk about this? There has to be another way, he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. I turned to him, my resolve as strong as ever. Talk? After everything you've done? You're delusional, Nathan. He reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. You'll pay for what you've done, both financially and by losing us. You've already lost everything that mattered. Returning to the courtroom, I felt empowered, my path clear. Nathan and Melissa had chosen their fate the moment they betrayed our trust, and now they were facing the consequences. As the judge announced a recess until the next session, Derek and I shared a look of determination. This was far from over, but we were on the right track. Nathan and Melissa's lawyer seemed rattled, a sign that our strategy was working. Outside the courtroom, Derek and I discussed our next steps. They think they can get away with a slap on the wrist. We'll show them how wrong they are, Derek said, anger lacing his voice. I nodded, the fire of revenge burning brighter within me. They'll regret the day they decided to betray us. This is just the beginning. As we left the courthouse, the cold air felt invigorating, a stark contrast to the heated emotions inside. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready for the fight. Nathan and Melissa would learn the hard way that actions have consequences, and Derek and I were the harbingers of their reckoning. The days leading up to the final court session were filled with a tense anticipation. Derek and I had become fixtures in each other's lives, our shared quest for justice, a bond that was unbreakable. We spent hours poring over documents and strategizing with our lawyers, determined to leave no stone unturned. On the eve of the final session, Derek called me. Tomorrow's it, Laura. Are you ready? As I'll ever be, I replied, my voice tinged with a mix of nerves and determination. We've got this. They won't know what hit them, he said, his confidence bolstering my spirits. The courtroom was packed the next day, a silent audience to the final act of our drama. Nathan and Melissa sat together, a united front that belied the cracks in their facade. As the session began, our lawyer presented our closing arguments with precision and unwavering conviction. He laid out the financial demands, the request for sole custody, and the punitive damages for the emotional toll their actions had taken on us. Nathan's lawyer attempted a rebuttal, arguing for leniency and a more equitable division of assets. My clients regret their actions, but they shouldn't be financially ruined because of a personal mistake. Derek leaned over to me, whispering, "A personal mistake? They call destroying families a mistake?" I couldn't help but scoff quietly, the absurdity of their defense clear as day. Then it was Melissa's turn to speak. She stood, her voice shaky. "I know we've caused pain, and I'm truly sorry for that. But please, think of the financial consequences. We have a child to think about." Her plea hung in the air, but my heart had hardened against their excuses. They thought of consequences only when faced with them, not when they embarked on their affair. Finally, Nathan stood. "I've made mistakes, but I'm asking for a chance to make things right. Don't let this mistake define our entire lives." The judge listened intently, his expression unreadable. After what felt like an eternity, he announced he would deliver his decision. The wait was agonizing, each tick of the clock a reminder of what was at stake. When the judge returned, the room fell silent. He began to speak, his voice firm. "After careful consideration, the court has decided to grant the plaintiff's requests for alimony, child support, and partial punitive damages. The betrayal and its impact on the families cannot be overlooked." A gasp went through the room, Nathan and Melissa's faces turning pale. The judge continued, outlining the financial ramifications and the custody arrangements that favored Derek and me. As the judge concluded, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Justice had been served, not just in words but in actions that would ensure Nathan and Melissa felt the consequences of their betrayal. Outside the courthouse, Derek and I shared a moment of quiet victory. "We did it," he said, a smile breaking through the exhaustion. "We did," I replied, the reality of our victory sinking in. They finally got what they deserved. As we parted ways, I felt a chapter of my life closing. The pain of betrayal would always be a part of me, but so would the strength I found in standing up for myself. Nathan and Melissa's downfall was a testament to karma's unyielding grip. They had chosen their path, and now they were forced to walk it, burdened by the financial and emotional weight of their choices. The drive home was reflective, a mix of sadness for what was lost and hope for what lay ahead. The battle was over, but the war for my own peace and happiness was just beginning. I was ready to face it head-on, armed with the knowledge that justice, in the end, always finds a way. In the aftermath of the court's decision, the world seemed to shift on its axis. The victory was bittersweet, the taste of justice mingled with the remnants of a life unraveled. Yet, amidst the rubble of broken relationships and shattered trust, a new resolve took root within me. The first signs of Nathan and Melissa's unraveling came swiftly. Nathan, burdened by the financial obligations imposed by the court, reached out in a desperate attempt to renegotiate the terms. "I can't afford this, Laura. It's going to ruin me," he pleaded over the phone, his voice a mix of desperation and disbelief. "The court has made its decision, Nathan. You should have thought about the consequences before," I replied, my voice steady, devoid of the warmth it once held for him. "But what about Ava? What about our family?" His attempt to tug at my heartstrings fell flat, the mention of our daughter igniting a protective fierceness within me. "Our family was broken the moment you chose Melissa over us. You're facing the consequences of your actions now," I said, hanging up before he could respond. The finality in my voice marked the end of our conversation, and in many ways, the end of our connection. Melissa, too, faced her comeuppance. With Nathan's finances in disarray, she found herself grappling with the reality of raising their child without the lavish lifestyle she was accustomed to. Her complaints filled the air, reaching me through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances who still lingered on the fringes of my life. "It's not fair. This isn't the life I signed up for," she lamented to anyone who would listen, her voice tinged with bitterness and regret. The schadenfreude I felt was tempered by a hint of pity, not for Melissa, but for the innocent child caught in the crossfire of adult folly. Derek and I, through our shared ordeal, had grown closer, our conversations a blend of commiseration and burgeoning friendship. One evening, over coffee, he shared a piece of news that felt like the final nail in the coffin of Nathan and Melissa's deceit. "They're struggling to make ends meet. Melissa's been looking for work, and Nathan's second job barely covers the alimony and child support," Derek said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice that mirrored my own. "It's the bed they made. Now they have to lie in it," I responded, the sentiment echoing the harsh reality of their situation. Our dialogue was interrupted by Ava's laughter, a sound that brought home the reason for all our struggles. Derek's daughter, too, found joy in the simple moments we shared, her presence a balm to the wounds of the past. As the days turned into weeks, the tangible outcomes of our legal victory became evident. Nathan and Melissa's facade of unity crumbled under the weight of financial strain and public scrutiny. Their attempts to maintain a semblance of normalcy were met with the cold, hard truth of their actions and the repercussions that followed. In the midst of their downfall, Derek and I found a semblance of peace. Our meetings, once dominated by strategies for legal battles, now gave way to conversations about healing and moving forward. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Derek mused one afternoon as we watched our children play in the park, their laughter a testament to their resilience. "We have," I agreed, allowing myself a moment to reflect on the journey. "And we'll keep moving forward, for them and for ourselves." The chapter of betrayal and revenge had closed, leaving behind lessons learned and strength gained. Nathan and Melissa's descent was a testament to the power of karma, a reminder that actions always have consequences. For Derek and I, the path ahead was clearer, paved with the promise of new beginnings and the determination to build a future defined not by the past, but by the possibilities that lay ahead. My name is Elena, and I am a weaver of words, fashioning stories from the comfort of my home office, my fingers tapping rhythmically on the keyboard, but not always to the satisfaction of my husband, Richard, who sees my freelance work as less of a career and more of a casual hobby to be set aside for household chores. It was a mundane Tuesday when I casually slipped into our conversation that a business trip would take me away for a few days. Richard raised an incredulous eyebrow, his stance rigid against the kitchen counter. "A business trip? Elena, come on. You just don't want to do the housework, do you?" The skepticism in his voice clear as day. I sighed, weary of having this discussion yet again. "It's not like that, Richard. There's a conference I've been invited to. It's important for networking." He cut me off with a dismissive wave. "Don't talk back, just listen to your husband." Such interactions were becoming the norm, a year into our marriage, and this wasn't how I imagined wedded bliss to be. Richard never truly recognized the effort that went into my writing and treated my freelance status as something insignificant. The irony was, my so-called insignificant work was the pillar of our financial stability. I paid the rent, the bills, and even his occasional luxuries. Yet in his eyes, I was just the housekeeper who filled the empty hours with typing on a computer. His lack of gratitude cut deeper each day, and I was reaching a threshold where silence was no longer an option. The prospect of turning his threatened papers of divorce into my victory lap was becoming more appealing by the second. I managed to keep a calm demeanor, however, and simply nodded, saying, "Okay, Richard, I understand." But as I packed my bags that night, my mind buzzed with thoughts of liberation, not just from the household work, but from a husband who couldn't see the value in what I did or in me. 3 years ago, our paths crossed when an assignment took me to a distant region where local customs and hidden gems awaited discovery. There, I met Richard, a kindred spirit of sorts, working for a competing publishing company. We both thrived on the thrill of uncovering untold stories and sharing them with the world. Our shared goals and zest for reporting brought us together, and tandem trips to investigate various locales evolved into late-night conversations long after the assignments ended. One thing led to another, and 2 years of dating blossomed into a proposal. We skipped the fanfare of a traditional wedding, but seized the symbolism, donning a wedding dress and tuxedo for a photo shoot that encapsulated our pledge of love in snapshots. Once married, we settled into my spacious condo, roomy enough to host our combined lives with ease. With marriage came contemplation of dreams, of futures, and for me, the pursuit of a freelance career. The job at my old publishing house offered a safety net, but my heart yearned to go solo. I decided to broach this subject one dinner night a week into our marriage. "Hey, Richard," I began tentatively, "I've been thinking about quitting my job at the publishing house." He put down his fork, staring at me as if I'd announced a trip to the moon. "What? Why would you do that out of the blue? I thought you wanted to grind harder at your career." "Yeah, but I want to try freelancing," I explained. The vision I had for my work life, the freedom I craved, it was all laid bare in my hopeful eyes. "Pfft, freelancing?" His scoff was a harsh note in the midst of our quiet dinner. "You think you can succeed just like that? You're not cut out for this. Focus on being a good wife, Elena, not chasing some fanciful dream." His words stung, an icy slap to my aspirations, but no matter how much I tried to reason with him, his stance was immovable. Each attempt was met with jeers or scathing critique. This didn't deter me. Folding my dreams away wasn't an option. With a heart both heavy and ablaze with resolve, I submitted my resignation at the publishing house, choosing the uncertain path of a freelance reporter. Richard erupted like a shaken soda bottle when he found out. "What the hell, Elena? You can't just make decisions like this without thinking about us." "I have thought it through, Richard. This is my dream," I protested, my voice a mix of apology and defiance. He sneered, tossing down a $1,000 note on the kitchen table. "Fine. From now on, this is what I put into the household. If you can't make ends meet, don't look at me." I locked away his derision and doubts. As the rift between us grew, my determination to prove him wrong grew with it. I was bent on succeeding, on rising above the expectations he so narrowly set for me. Ignorance and mockery from the person who vowed to love and support me ought to have crippled my spirit, but instead it only steeled my resolve to thrive. Richard's refusal to train his eyes on my potential pushed me to find my rhythm as a freelance writer. The days melted into nights, a blur of words and deadlines, pitches and publications. I submitted articles to different magazines and websites, each byline a badge of hard-fought independence. With steady persistence, direct commissions began to trickle in, then a deluge. I started a blog amid these ventures, composing pieces which resonated with readers far and wide. The small following bloomed into a substantial readership, transforming that side gig into a significant source of income. The meager earnings Richard so scorned had blossomed into a cascade, month by month, until I was making triple what I used to as a salaried reporter. But I kept this to myself, fearing Richard's reaction if he knew I surpassed him not only in fulfillment, but in finance. His continued disdain painted a stark contrast to my reality, where my articles were sought after, about, and well received. A year of marriage had done little to soften him. If anything, it only solidified his expectations of me as nothing more than a live-in maid with a writing hobby. And so I maintained this ruse even as his verbal tirades grew hotter and more frequent. One evening, returning from a successful shopping spree funded by my hard-earned cash, his sneer met my eyes as I juggled the bags through the doorway. "That's reckless spending for someone who hardly contributes financially," he spat. The sting brought with it an all-too-familiar sense of indignation. "I work for my money," I retorted, irritated. "This is my reward." He threw a contemptuous look my way, gripping an empty beer can with a tightening fist. "Sure, luxury's on my dime, right?" Before I could even protest, he flung the can at me. By some grace it missed, but the message was clear. My time in this house was coming to a close. As I lay awake that night, the sound of Richard's breathing filled the room, like a metronome ticking off the seconds of our dwindling marriage. His outburst lingered, the scent of spilled beer on my new dress, a pungent reminder of how far we'd strayed from the partners we'd pledged to be. I reflected on the growing divide between us. My career took off, and my spirit soared with each article I penned. But to Richard, I'd become less an equal and more a nuisance, someone who somehow couldn't fulfill the simple duty of being a traditional housewife. My schedule was built around his whims. If I came home past the curfew of his creation or didn't have dinner waiting, his rants would fill the evening. This imbalance couldn't continue. It bred a resentment that gnawed at my heart each day, a crushing sense of isolation paired with these oppressive conditions. Field reporting overnight was forbidden by Richard's decree, as he maintained a bizarre hold on my movements. I adhered to his nonsensical rules, even as they strangled the freedom and spontaneity my job required. I had to keep the peace in our household. Richard worked in an office, adhering to a structure he understood, while I worked with the freedom he envied and perhaps resented. I treaded lightly, not wanting to fan the flames of his insecurity. Yet, amidst this tiptoeing, I continued to build a life for myself with words crafted out of truth and passion. Despite the escalating home tension, my reputation in the freelance world flourished. Demand for my writing surged, and my bank account, a secret I held closely, reflected the fruits of my labor. I carried the financial mantle with ease, a fact unknown to Richard, who languished in his ignorance. I buried the truth deep, wary of his jealousy and knowing full well it would only fuel his disdain. But this facade couldn't last forever. My resilience was waning, and the final straw lay just beyond the horizon. The phone rang, its piercing tone slicing through my concentration. On the other end was a representative from the publishing company that had become a staple in my list of clients. They had an assignment for me, an in-depth feature on the aftermath of an overseas natural disaster. It was an opportunity I couldn't refuse, a story that needed telling, and one that I felt drawn to narrate. But this trip would break Richard's cardinal rule. I wasn't to be away overnight, let alone for an extended period. As I rehearsed my explanation, I could practically hear the combative notes in his reply waiting to be unleashed. When the moment came, his response was as predictable as I'd feared. "A business trip? Are you serious? You're dodging chores now, that's what it is." His eyes bore into me, disbelief and accusation rolled into one hard glare. "It's not like that, Richard," I pleaded. "This is a significant assignment." But he wasn't having it. Instead, he threw absurd assumptions at me, painting me as a deceitful slacker beneath the guise of a hard-working journalist. His words became background noise as a plan began to form in my mind, a way out of this repetitive cycle of accusation and defense. It was during one particularly heated exchange that the proverbial straw snapped. "Know your place, Elena," he fumed, yanking divorce papers out from beneath a stack of unopened bills. "The path you've chosen is a dead end. I've been patient with you, but it's clear you need a wake-up call." The papers lay heavy on the kitchen island, a tangible manifestation of his constant threats. Richard wielded them as leverage, but in that moment I saw them for what they truly were, a release from the prison he had built around me. Determination swelled within me as I reviewed the divorce papers Richard considered an empty threat. But for me, they signified a turning point, a chance to reclaim the narrative of my life. I hastily filled out the paperwork, signed them with a finality that felt like a breath of fresh air, and submitted them to the courthouse. Simultaneously, I arranged to end the lease on the condo that had become a battleground rather than a home. The world awaited, and I wouldn't be tethered any longer. Departing on my business trip, I left no word for Richard, no trail for him to follow. My heart was both heavy and exhilarated as the plane lifted off, soaring high like the newfound control over my life. When I returned from my assignment, a wealth of experiences richer and stories to tell, the confrontation with Richard was unavoidable. The air was tense as I opened my front door. His form loomed large, a shadow against the backdrop of our shared past. "You dare show up after missing for weeks?" Richard's voice erupted, a thunder of outrage and confusion. "I had to attend to overseas." I countered with a practiced calm. He laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "Work? You can barely manage local stories. Don't pretend you're someone of importance." I saw in his eyes an unwavering superiority, an obstinacy that rejected the notion of my success. So I laid bare the truth I'd been guarding. "Actually, I've been earning a substantial income, 5 times what you make." His face drained of color, his posture deflating as the reality of the situation settled upon him. And when he lunged forward with fresh divorce papers, I knew my chance had come to reveal my trump card. "Sign these," he demanded, voice trembling. "There's no need. I already filed for divorce 2 weeks ago." I stood tall, feeling the last of my bindings to him unravel. His jaw slackened as understanding dawned upon him. "You filed for divorce? But why?" "Because, Richard, you presented them," I snapped. "You never wanted to be with someone like me, someone ambitious, and now we're free to go our separate ways." "What will I do now?" he stammered, lost. "You'll move out," I answered coldly. "This is my place now." My firm words ushered him out of my life, out of the door, and into the uncertainty he had never contemplated. Shoulders slumped. Richard was finally gone, and with him the heavy shroud of oppressive dominance that had filled our home. In the quiet that settled like a soft blanket over the newly empty space, I could finally breathe. I learned of Richard's struggles through mutual acquaintances, his meager lifestyle, constrained finances, and the unyielding reality of living within one's means. He now resided in a modest apartment, miles away from comfort or excess, a stark contrast to his previous existence. My own journey was a different tale. I had invested in a new condo, a sanctuary for me and my thriving career. The move was seamless, and life had never tasted sweeter. The article on the natural disaster made waves, earning me recognition among my peers and further solidifying my reputation as a freelance journalist of note. The blog, now a cornerstone of my income, flourished with engagement, and I found joy in the interactions with my readers. Each comment, each shared story was a testament to the decision I had made, a leap into authenticity. My days danced with deadlines and drafts. I thrived in the exciting chaos of freelance work. No longer bound by Richard's restrictions, I accepted assignments that resonated with my interests and passion. The stories called out to be told, and I was their willing scribe, penning narratives that connected, educated, and stirred the heart. And in this sunlit room, surrounded by my words and the peace that had eluded me for so long, I knew that this, freedom, fulfillment, the power of my own voice, was where I should have been all along. I wrote on, dedicated to the craft, newly alive to the possibility that my work, my dream, was not only viable but vital and entirely mine to shape. As I tiptoed up the stairs of my own house, a place that once felt like a safe haven, my heart pounded against my chest. I avoided the third step, notorious for its creak, a small detail Daniel always promised to fix but never did. Clutching my phone, prepared to record, I felt like an intruder in my own home. The murmur of voices from the bedroom grew louder with each step. Pressing my ear against the door, my breath hitched. The voices belonged to Daniel, my husband of a decade, and Emma, his ex-girlfriend he casually referred to as just an old friend. Hearing Daniel's voice, laced with a familiarity that made my stomach churn, I silently started recording. "I never thought I'd run into you again working at that gas station. This must be fate," he said, his tone intimate and unsettling. "Ah, why did I marry her? Why did you marry your husband?" His words, dripping with disdain, were a sharp jab to my heart. "I thought she'd be docile, easy to control. If I can control the money, I can spend however I want," he continued, each word slicing through me. Emma's giggling followed. "A free housekeeper?" she teased. Their laughter was a cruel melody that filled the room. The raw spite in their conversation was overwhelming. My hands shook with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. How could Daniel, the man I had loved and trusted, speak about me with such malice? Pushing the door open, I confronted them. Their shocked faces briefly satisfied the storm inside me, but it wasn't enough. Not even close. "So, this is what you really think of me?" My voice was eerily calm, belying the turmoil inside. Daniel fumbled for words, but I wasn't there to listen. I came for something else. Retribution. "You're going to regret every single word," I whispered, more to myself than to them. I turned and left them scrambling for excuses I had no interest in hearing. Descending the stairs, a plan began to crystallize in my mind. Daniel had unveiled his true self, and it was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. I would see to that. As I sat in the dim light of the living room, the shadows seemed to mock me, echoing the darkness that had settled in my heart. The events of the evening replayed in my mind, each word cutting deeper than the last. But amidst this turmoil, memories of the past crept in, unwelcome yet persistent. I remembered the first time I met Daniel. It was at a mutual friend's birthday party. He was charismatic, his laughter infectious, and his interest in me flattering. "You have this warmth about you, Laura," he had said, his eyes locked with mine. "It's so rare and genuine." I was swept away by his charm, believing I had found someone who truly saw me. But as our relationship progressed, so did the subtle changes in Daniel. The man who once admired my independence began to question it. "Why do you need to work so hard? I can take care of us," he'd say, his words initially sounding like care but slowly morphing into control. The night we got engaged, I remembered feeling a twinge of doubt. "Are you sure about this, Laura?" my best friend Julia had asked, her eyes searching mine for uncertainty. I brushed her concerns aside, convinced that love would conquer all. But love wasn't enough to blind me from the truth. Daniel's mask began to slip after our wedding. His sweet words turned sour, his gestures of care became constraints. "A woman like you should focus on the home," he'd insist, chipping away at my confidence and independence. It was the same story every day. Daniel would come home, his eyes scanning the house for any imperfection, any excuse to belittle me. "What have you been doing all day? This place is a mess," he'd snarl, even when everything was spotless. I tried to hold on, to believe that this was just a phase, that the loving Daniel I knew was still there. But that night, hearing him with Emma, shattered any illusions I had left. The man I married was a facade, a cruel illusion. Rage simmered within me, not just for his betrayal, but for the years of manipulation, for making me doubt my worth. But this rage was different. It was clarifying, empowering. It was the catalyst I needed. "I won't be a victim anymore," I whispered to the empty room. Daniel had made his choice, and now it was time to make mine. It was time for him to learn that the woman he thought he could control was not going to bow down any longer. The morning light did nothing to ease the turmoil inside me. Over a cup of coffee that tasted more bitter than usual, I dialed Julia's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice heavy with concern. "I need your help," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging within. "I'm setting a trap for Daniel, and I need you to play along." Julia didn't hesitate. "Whatever you need, Laura, I'm here for you." The plan was simple yet effective. I told Daniel about a spontaneous weekend getaway with Julia. His reaction was predictably self-centered. "Sure, go have fun. You deserve a break," he said, barely looking up from his phone. The smirk that followed told me everything I needed to know. On the day of our supposed trip, I packed a bag and left, making sure Daniel saw me. But instead of heading to the airport, I drove to a nearby cafe, a strategic spot with a clear view of our house. Julia joined me there, her presence a comforting reminder that I wasn't alone in this. We didn't have to wait long. An hour later, Emma, clad in a black dress and oversized sunglasses, appeared on our street. She glanced around nervously before slipping into my house. "Got you," I muttered under my breath. Julia placed a hand on my shoulder. "What now, Laura?" "Now we wait," I said, my eyes fixed on the bedroom window. The waiting was the hardest part. With each passing minute, my resolve hardened. I thought of all the lies, the disrespect, the betrayal. It wasn't just about catching them in the act. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I made my move. Quietly unlocking the front door, I tiptoed up the stairs, the same stairs I had ascended just nights before. The murmurs from the bedroom were clearer this time, their laughter echoing in the hallway. Without a word, I flung open the bedroom door. The look on Daniel and Emma's faces was priceless, a mix of shock, fear, and guilt. But I didn't linger for explanations or excuses. "You're pathetic, both of you," I spat out, my voice laced with contempt. Without another word, I left them scrambling to cover up their indiscretions. As I walked out of the house, a sense of satisfaction washed over me. It was the first step towards my freedom, towards a life where I was no longer a puppet in Daniel's twisted game. The morning after my confrontation with Daniel and Emma, I awoke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. As I sipped my coffee, the events of the previous night replayed in my mind, fueling my determination. I called Julia, who answered with a worried tone. "Laura, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine, Julia. More than fine, actually. I'm ready for the next step," I replied, a steely edge in my voice. I had a plan, one that would not only expose Daniel, but also leave him with a taste of the humiliation and pain he had caused me. "I need you to spread the word about Daniel and Emma. Let everyone know what kind of man my husband really is," I instructed Julia. Without hesitation, Julia agreed. "Consider it done. Everyone will know the truth about Daniel." The wheels were in motion, but I needed to confront Daniel one more time. I wanted him to see the consequences of his actions, to understand that he couldn't treat people like disposable objects without repercussions. I returned home unexpectedly, finding Daniel in the living room, a picture of guilt. "Laura, he began, but I cut him off. "Save it, Daniel. I know everything. And soon everyone else will too," I said, my voice calm but laced with venom. Daniel's face turned white. "What do you mean, everyone else?" "Oh, I made sure our little suburban community knows all about your affair with Emma. How does it feel, Daniel, to be exposed for who you really are?" I asked, the satisfaction evident in my tone. Daniel stammered, trying to formulate a response, but it was clear he was shaken. "You can't do this to me, Laura. You're ruining my reputation." "Your reputation?" I laughed bitterly. "What about my life, Daniel? What about the years I spent living with your lies and manipulation? This is just the beginning. You'll see what it's like to have your life turned upside down." As I turned to leave, I left Daniel with a final thought. "You should have treated me with respect, Daniel. You're about to learn a hard lesson in karma." Walking out of that room, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had taken control of my story, and while the road ahead would be challenging, I was ready to face it head-on, free from Daniel's shadow. The next morning dawned with a sense of inevitability. I knew that the fallout from my actions was just beginning. As I prepared my breakfast, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Ignoring it, I relished the brief moment of calm before the storm. Finally, I answered, already knowing who it would be. "What do you want, Daniel?" I asked, my voice icy. "Laura, please, you have to stop this madness," Daniel pleaded, the desperation clear in his voice. "Madness? Oh, you mean telling the truth, exposing you for the liar and cheater you are?" I countered, unable to keep the bitterness out of my tone. Daniel was silent for a moment, likely grappling with the reality of his situation. "You're destroying everything I have, Laura. My job, my reputation." "And what about what you destroyed, Daniel? Did you think about that when you were with Emma? Did you think about us?" I asked, the hurt underlying my anger. Daniel's voice broke slightly. "I know I made a mistake, but this isn't the way to handle it. We can work this out, Laura." I laughed humorlessly. "Work this out? There's nothing left to work out, Daniel. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it." "But Laura, No, Daniel. It's over. You've lost the right to have a say in how I handle this. You lost that right when you betrayed me," I interrupted, cutting him off. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I knew that Daniel was finally starting to understand the gravity of his actions. "Goodbye, Daniel," I said firmly, ending the call. As I put down the phone, I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. I had set my plan in motion, and there was no turning back now. Daniel would have to face the consequences of his actions, just as I had to face the heartbreak he caused. But in that moment, I also felt a sense of empowerment. I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the author of my own destiny, and I was writing a new chapter, one where I was in control. The days following my conversation with Daniel were a whirlwind of emotion and activity. Word of his infidelity had spread like wildfire, and the once respected man found himself the subject of whispers and sidelong glances. It was the beginning of his unraveling, and in a twisted way, it was satisfying to watch. I was sitting in my living room, the silence of the house echoing around me when I heard the front door open. Daniel walked in, his usual confident demeanor replaced by one of defeat. "Laura, we need to talk," he said, his voice void of its usual command. I looked up at him, my expression stoic. "There's nothing left to say, Daniel." He took a deep breath, desperation creeping into his voice. "Please, Laura, I know I've made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, start over." "Start over?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "After everything you've done, you think we can just start over? You destroyed our marriage, Daniel. There's no coming back from that." Daniel's face contorted with frustration. "You're being unreasonable, Laura. You're letting your emotions get the better of you." "My emotions?" I laughed bitterly. "My emotions are the only thing keeping me sane right now. You betrayed me, Daniel. You humiliated me, and now you have to live with the consequences." Daniel stepped closer, his voice softening. "I love you, Laura. I never wanted to hurt you." I stood up, anger coursing through me. "Love? You don't know the first thing about love. Love isn't deceit and betrayal. Love isn't sneaking around behind your partner's back." Daniel reached out, but I stepped back. Don't you dare touch me." He stopped, his hand hanging in the air. "What do you want from me, Laura?" "I want a divorce, Daniel. I want to be free from this lie of a marriage," I said, my voice unwavering. Daniel's face fell, the realization finally sinking in. A divorce. "Yes, a divorce. It's the only way I can start to heal from the damage you've caused." Daniel looked defeated, the weight of his actions finally dawning on him. He nodded slowly, a silent acceptance of the end. As he left the house, I felt a sense of liberation. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I was taking back my life, one step at a time. The decision to divorce Daniel was like setting a heavy burden down, but with it came a flood of practicalities and legalities. I spent days gathering documents and speaking with lawyers, ensuring I was prepared for the road ahead. One afternoon, amidst a pile of paperwork, the doorbell rang. Standing on my doorstep was Daniel, looking more haggard than I had ever seen him. His eyes were desperate, searching. Laura, I've been thinking, we can still fix this. We can start over, maybe move to a new place, a fresh start, he pleaded, his voice shaky. I leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. Daniel, it's over. There's nothing left to salvage. He took a step closer, his desperation palpable. I can change, Laura. I'll do anything. Change, I scoffed. You had years to change. This is just you trying to avoid the consequences of your actions. Daniel's face hardened. You're being vindictive, Laura. You're just trying to punish me. Punish you? I asked, my voice rising. You think this is about punishment? This is about respect, something you never showed me. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched on his face. What do you want from me? I want a divorce, Daniel. I want to be free from this toxic relationship. I want to find happiness, something you never cared about. Daniel's posture deflated. You really won't give us another chance? There is no us anymore, Daniel. You made sure of that, I replied, my tone final. He stared at me for a moment, a mix of sorrow and anger in his eyes, then turned and walked away. I watched him go, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. This was the end of a chapter, but the beginning of something new for me. In the days that followed, I received calls from mutual friends, some expressing support, others unsure of what to say. It was clear that Daniel's image in our community had crumbled. The man once admired was now seen for who he truly was. As I sat in my now quiet house, I realized this was my chance to rebuild, to create a life that was truly mine, free from the shadows of deceit and manipulation. Daniel's downfall was his own doing, and I, at last, was free to move forward. The divorce proceedings were draining, a constant back and forth of legal jargon and negotiations. But with each signed document, I felt a piece of my old constrained life fall away, replaced by a sense of liberation and new possibilities. One brisk morning, as I sat in my attorney's office, the final papers were presented to me. My hand was steady as I signed my name, officially ending my marriage to Daniel. It felt like signing a declaration of freedom. Leaving the office, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey. The pain, the betrayal, and finally, the vindication. It wasn't just about getting revenge on Daniel. It was about reclaiming my own life. As I walked through the park, the crisp air felt refreshing, almost symbolic of my new start. I passed couples walking hand in hand and families playing on the grass, each scene a reminder of what life could offer beyond the confines of a toxic relationship. Later that day, as I sat in my now quiet and peaceful home, I received a call from Julia. Laura, have you heard about Daniel? I paused, a twinge of curiosity mingling with indifference. No, what about him? He's struggling, Laura. Lost his job, his friends. He's a shadow of the man he once was. It's like he's gotten a taste of his own medicine, Julia said, a note of satisfaction in her voice. I sighed, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Julia, I don't take pleasure in his suffering, but he brought this upon himself. It's the result of his actions, not mine. You're right, Laura. You've handled this with such strength. So, what's next for you? Julia asked, her voice warm. I looked around my home, a place that once felt like a prison but now felt like a sanctuary. I'm going to start living for myself, Julia, rediscover my passions, maybe travel, meet new people. I have a whole world to explore, and for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future. There was a lightness in my heart as I spoke, a sense of adventure and hope. The journey had been difficult, but it led me to this moment of self-realization and empowerment. I'm proud of you, Laura. You deserve all the happiness in the world, Julia said, her voice filled with affection. As we ended the call, I realized that this wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life, a chapter where I was the author and the story was mine to write. The sun was setting as I, Emily Carter, trudged up the steps to our modest suburban home. The weight of the grocery bags in my arms was nothing compared to the heaviness in my heart. At 29, I had imagined my life differently, but here I was, about to face another evening of scrutiny. As I pushed the door open, the familiar, sterile scent of our living room greeted me. Mark was sitting at the dining table, his back straight as an arrow, his eyes fixated on some papers. He didn't look up as I entered. "Mark, I'm back from the store," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. He glanced up, his eyes immediately falling on the bags in my hands. "Show me what you bought, Emily." His tone was casual, but it carried an undercurrent of command that set my nerves on edge. I hesitated, then placed the bags on the table. Mark began to rummage through them, his brows furrowing with every item he inspected. "We don't need this," he said, discarding a pack of cookies. "Or this," he added, tossing aside a small bottle of scented hand lotion I had bought for myself. I watched in silence, my heart sinking. These were little joys I allowed myself, tiny indulgences in a life that had become increasingly devoid of them. "Mark, why are you doing this?" I finally asked, unable to hide the quiver in my voice. He looked up, his expression one of cold practicality. "We agreed to cut down expenses, Emily. Your little joys aren't essentials." "But they're just small things," I protested weakly. Mark's eyes narrowed. "It's not about the size, Emily. It's about principle. We need to save every penny. I thought you understood that." I felt a surge of anger, mixed with a sense of helplessness. This was not the first time we had this conversation. Since our marriage, Mark's frugality had turned into an obsession. It wasn't just about saving money, it was about control. "Fine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll return them." As I repacked the items, Mark went back to his papers, his disapproval hanging in the air like a thick fog. I stood there for a moment, looking at him. This was my husband, a man more concerned about a few dollars than the happiness of his wife. That evening, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, a thought struck me. Mark wanted frugality? I would give him frugality like he'd never seen. A fire ignited within me, a mix of anger and determination. It was time for Mark to experience the life he so rigidly enforced on me. As sleep eluded me, plans began to form in my mind. I would turn his obsession on its head. I would push his frugality to its limits and see how he liked living under the stringent rules he set. It was a risky game, but I was done being the submissive, agreeable wife. Mark had awakened something in me, a spirit of defiance that I never knew I had. And with that realization, a new Emily Carter was born. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a muted glow on the kitchen where I stood, brewing coffee. The sound of Mark's footsteps echoed down the stairs, a daily ritual signaling the start of another day under his watchful eye. "Morning, Emily," he said, his voice devoid of warmth as he glanced at the breakfast table. "Good morning, Mark," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He sat down, surveying the modest spread of toast and scrambled eggs. His eyes, sharp and calculating, missed nothing. The tension in the room was palpable, a silent war waged at the breakfast table. As Mark ate, his critique began. "You used 3 eggs, we agreed on 2 per meal. And why is there butter on the toast? We need to cut down on luxuries." I clenched my fists under the table, forcing a calm response. "I thought a little change would be nice. I'll remember next time." Mark's gaze was unyielding. "Change is unnecessary. We have a budget for a reason, Emily. You need to stick to it." The meal continued in strained silence. I watched Mark, a mix of resentment and weariness building within me. This was the man I married, a man whose love for numbers and budgets overshadowed everything else, including our relationship. After breakfast, as Mark left for work, he turned to me, his expression stern. "Emily, I expect you to clean the house today. Make sure you do a thorough job." I nodded, biting back a retort. The door closed behind him, and I was left alone in the silent, orderly house that had become my prison. As the day progressed, I cleaned with robotic precision, my mind replaying the years of our marriage. Mark's controlling behavior had gradually escalated, turning our home into a place of rules and restrictions. His obsession with saving and cleanliness overshadowed any semblance of joy or spontaneity. In the midst of my cleaning, I stumbled upon an old photo album. Flipping through it, I saw pictures of a younger, happier us. The contrast between those carefree days and our current life was stark. Where had things gone so wrong? That evening, as Mark returned, he began his usual inspection of the house. "The windows aren't clean enough. There are streaks," he said, his tone accusatory. I followed him, my heart sinking with each criticism. "I cleaned them twice, Mark." He shook his head, disappointment etched on his face. "Not good enough. You have one job, Emily. It's not that hard." His words stung, a reminder of how little he'd me. I was more than a housekeeper, more than a budget manager. I was a person with dreams and desires, all of which had been suffocated under Mark's relentless need for control. As Mark continued his scrutiny, I knew something had to change. I couldn't live like this anymore. The time for subtle defiance had passed. It was time for bolder actions, time to show Mark the consequences of his unyielding nature. That night I lay in bed planning. Mark wanted a perfectly budgeted, spotless house. I would give him exactly that, but not in the way he expected. The seeds of my plan were taking root, and soon Mark would see just how far his frugality could be pushed. The day was unusually warm, the kind that heralded the end of spring and the onset of a scorching summer. I was in the midst of preparing dinner when my phone buzzed. It was Mark, and his message was curt, bringing a friend from work. Be prepared. My heart sank. Not only did this disrupt the carefully planned budget meal, but it also meant catering to an unexpected guest, with Mark's critical eye watching every move. As I scrambled to adjust the meal, I couldn't help but feel a surge of resentment. Mark's impromptu decision, without any consideration for me, was just another example of his controlling nature. The doorbell rang, and I took a deep breath, bracing myself. Mark entered with his colleague, a sharply dressed man named Brian. Introductions were made, and I forced a smile, playing the gracious hostess. Dinner was a tense affair. Brian, oblivious to the undercurrents, praised the meal. Mark, however, had a different agenda. "Emily could have done better if she had more time," he said, a hint of condescension in his voice. "She's still learning to manage the household efficiently." I felt a flush of embarrassment. Mark's words, thinly veiled as constructive criticism, were a public indictment of my capabilities. The humiliation stung, fueling the fire of rebellion within me. As the evening wore on, Mark's critiques grew more pointed. "Emily, why is the living room so cluttered?" he asked, gesturing at the minimal decorations I had put up. "Cluttered," I echoed, my voice a mix of surprise and indignation. "I thought it looked nice." Mark shook his head, his tone patronizing. "You need to understand the difference between decorating and cluttering, Emily. A clean, minimal space is more appealing." Brian, sensing the tension, tried to lighten the mood, but Mark's domineering presence overshadowed his efforts. After Brian left, Mark turned to me, his expression one of disappointment. "You could have done a better job, Emily. You need to be more organized and efficient," he said. His words were the final straw. I had tolerated his controlling behavior for too long, adjusting my life to fit into his rigid, frugal world. But no more. It was time for Mark to understand the consequences of his actions. "I understand, Mark," I said, my voice calm but with an edge that hinted at the storm brewing within. "I'll make sure everything is up to your standards." That night, as I lay in bed, my mind raced with plans. Mark wanted efficiency and frugality. I would give him a taste of his own medicine. I would create a home so Spartan, so devoid of any excess, that he would be forced to confront the absurdity of his ways. The next day, I began my mission. Unnecessary items were sold or donated. I stripped the house of anything that Mark could deem superfluous, all under the guise of embracing his philosophy of minimalism and saving. As the house transformed, so did I. Gone was the compliant, subdued Emily. In her place stood a woman determined to fight back, to reclaim her life from the shackles of Mark's oppressive frugality. And as I watched the house become a stark, empty shell, a sense of empowerment grew within me. Mark had awakened a spirit of defiance, and there was no turning back. The transformation of our home into a stark, barren landscape was almost complete. The living room, once cozy and inviting, now echoed with the bareness of its walls and floors. I sold off the decorative lamps, the plush sofa, and even the television, all in the name of frugality. Mark's reaction when he returned home that evening was exactly as I had anticipated, a mix of shock and disbelief. "Emily, what have you done?" he gasped, his eyes scanning the hollowed-out space. "I've embraced your philosophy of minimalism and saving, Mark," I said, my voice steady and calm. "We don't need these luxuries. We're saving money." But the TV? And the sofa?" Mark stuttered, his composure unraveling. "They were unnecessary expenses," I replied, echoing his own words. "We need to focus on what's essential." The dinner that night was a simple affair, rice and beans, the cheapest meal I could muster. Mark stared at his plate, the realization of his new reality sinking in. "This is quite plain," he commented, poking at the beans. "It's economical," I said. "We're cutting down on food costs, remember?" As the days passed, Mark's initial shock gave way to frustration. The absence of his favorite gadgets, the monotony of the meals, and the starkness of our home began to wear on him. "Emily, this is too much," he finally said one evening, his patience worn thin. "We need some comfort in our lives." "This is what you wanted, Mark," I reminded him, "a life free of unnecessary expenses." Mark's displeasure grew each day. He missed his comforts, his routines. But I was unyielding. This was my silent rebellion, my way of showing him the extreme consequences of his actions. One evening, as we sat in the uncomfortably empty living room, Mark broke the silence. "Emily, I think we need to reassess our situation. This isn't living." I looked at him, a hint of triumph in my eyes. "Oh, have you realized that there's more to life than just saving money?" Mark's expression softened, a rare moment of vulnerability. "Maybe I've been too harsh. We can find a balance." But the damage was done. The resentment and bitterness had taken root in my heart. Mark had awakened a spirit of defiance in me, and there was no going back to the way things were. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. That night, as I lay in bed, I pondered over the changes in our life. I had set out to teach Mark a lesson, but in doing so, I had also freed myself from the constraints of his oppressive frugality. Mark had hoped to mold me into his ideal frugal wife. Instead, he had unknowingly unleashed a stronger, more independent Emily, and there was no turning back from that. The new normal in our home was anything but comfortable. The drastic changes I had implemented were taking a toll on Mark, and his frustration was palpable. He missed the comforts he had taken for granted, and the simplicity of our meals seemed to be a constant reminder of what he had lost. One evening, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, the silence was heavier than usual. Mark pushed the beans around his plate, his appetite clearly affected by the lack of variety. "Emily, we need to talk," he said, breaking the silence. I looked up, my expression neutral. "What about, Mark?" "This," he gestured around the bare room, "all of this. It's too extreme. We need to find a middle ground." I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Mark was finally experiencing the strain of his own stringent rules. "I thought you wanted us to save money," I replied. "Isn't this what you always wanted?" "It was," Mark admitted, "but not like this. Not at the cost of our comfort and happiness." His words struck a chord in me. For so long I had yearned for him to acknowledge that life was more than just saving money. But now, his realization seemed too little, too late. "Maybe we can start by getting some furniture back," Mark suggested hesitantly. I pondered his words, weighing my desire for revenge against the possibility of easing our living conditions. "Perhaps," I conceded, "but on one condition." "What's that?" Mark asked, a flicker of hope in his eyes. I took a deep breath, my decision clear. "I want a divorce, Mark." The words hung in the air, heavy and irrevocable. Mark's face drained of color, his hope replaced by shock. "A divorce?" he echoed, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes," I said firmly. "I can't live like this anymore. I need my freedom, my independence." Mark was silent, the weight of my words sinking in. The man who had once controlled every aspect of our lives was now facing a future he hadn't foreseen. "But what about us?" he finally asked, a hint of desperation in his tone. "There is no us anymore, Mark," I replied, my voice steady. "You've shown me that I need more than just a frugal life. I need to be valued, to be happy." The rest of the dinner passed in silence. Mark was lost in his thoughts, and I was resolute in my decision. The path I had chosen was not easy, but it was necessary. I had endured enough under Mark's oppressive frugality, and it was time for me to reclaim my life. As I lay in bed that night, the reality of my decision settled in. I was about to embark on a new journey, one that was uncertain but filled with the promise of freedom. Mark had taught me the value of saving, but in doing so, he had also taught me the value of living. The days following my declaration for a divorce were filled with a strange, tense calm. Mark, once the unyielding enforcer of frugality, now seemed like a shadow of his former self, his usual criticisms and commands noticeably absent. One evening, as we sat in our sparsely furnished living room, Mark broke the silence that had become our constant companion. "Emily, I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he began, his voice tinged with regret. "I realize now how much I've hurt you, how my obsession with saving has cost us our happiness." I looked at him, surprised by his introspection. "I'm glad you understand, Mark, but it doesn't change how I feel. I need to move on." Mark nodded, a resigned look in his eyes. "I won't contest the divorce," he said quietly, "but I want you to know I truly regret not seeing how my actions affected you." His words, sincere and filled with remorse, gave me no pleasure. Instead, they served as a reminder of what our marriage could have been if things had been different. The divorce proceedings were straightforward, yet each signed document felt like a closing chapter of a book filled with complex emotions. I was gaining my freedom, but the path was lined with remnants of a life that could have been. With the divorce finalized, I found myself standing at the threshold of a new beginning. The house, once a symbol of Mark's stringent rules, was now mine to reinvent. I started slowly, adding small touches that reflected my tastes and personality. But the biggest change was within me. The years of living under Mark's control had instilled in me a sense of determination and resilience I never knew I had. I took up a job at a local bookstore, a place that had always brought me peace and comfort. It was a modest beginning, but it marked the start of my journey towards self-reliance. As I settled into my new life, I often thought about Mark. Despite everything, I hoped he would find his own path to happiness, one not dictated by the rigid confines of frugality. One day, while rearranging the bookshelves at work, a familiar face walked in. It was Mark. He looked different, more relaxed, less burdened. He approached me, a small smile on his face. "Emily, it's good to see you," he said, his voice warm. "You too, Mark," I replied, surprised by the ease of our interaction. "I just wanted to tell you, I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of changing," he shared. "I started volunteering at a community center. It's helped me realize there's more to life than saving money." I smiled, genuinely happy for him. "That's great, Mark. I'm glad you found something fulfilling." We chatted briefly about our new lives before Mark left, a sense of closure hanging in the air. As I watched him walk away, I felt a sense of peace. We had both moved on, learning and growing from our shared past. That evening, as I closed the bookstore and walked home, I felt a sense of contentment. Life had thrown challenges my way, but I had emerged stronger and more self-assured. My future was unwritten, a canvas waiting to be painted with the vibrant colors of new experiences and opportunities, and I was ready to embrace it all. Months had passed since my divorce from Mark, and life had settled into a new, comfortable rhythm. The bookstore job had become more than just a means to an end. It was a place where I found joy and purpose. One day, as I was organizing the latest arrivals, a familiar face appeared among the shelves. It was Mark, looking more at ease than I had ever seen him. "Emily," he greeted, a tentative smile on his face. "Mark," I replied, a bit taken aback by his unexpected visit. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, looking around at the books. "I just wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm doing well," I responded, my tone guarded yet polite. "And you?" "I've been better," he admitted. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since our divorce, about how I treated you, about everything." His words caught me off guard. It was rare for Mark to acknowledge his faults so openly. "I've realized I was wrong, Emily," he continued. "I was so focused on saving money that I lost sight of what truly mattered. I lost you." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, but it did little to stir the old feelings I once had for him. Too much had happened, too much had changed. "Mark, I appreciate your apology," I said, choosing my words carefully. "But I've moved on. The life we had together is in the past." He nodded, a look of understanding crossing his face. "I know, and I'm not here to ask for a second chance. I just wanted you to know that I regret my actions. You deserved better." We talked for a while, reminiscing about the good times and acknowledging the bad. It was a conversation that brought closure, a final acknowledgement of our shared history and the separate paths we were now on. As Mark left the bookstore, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was the closing of a chapter, the end of a story that had shaped me in ways I never expected. Standing among the rows of books, I realized how far I had come, from the timid, subdued wife to a woman who had reclaimed her independence and strength. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. I closed the bookstore that evening with a sense of accomplishment and optimism. The future was mine to write, a blank page waiting to be filled with new stories, new experiences. As I walked home under the starlit sky, I thought about what lay ahead. There would be challenges, of course, but I felt ready to face them. For the first time in a long time, I was truly excited about what the future held. Life had taught me that change was inevitable, but it was how we responded to that change that defined us. I had chosen to rise above the struggles, to forge a path that was true to who I was. And as I turned the key to my apartment, stepping into a space that was entirely my own, I knew that the best was yet to come.